I walked in on my wife kissing my best friend. That moment shattered everything I believed in. My wife, Carol, and Jim were betraying me right under my nose. They went to events together, spent my hard-earned money, and laughed behind my back. One night, she came home drunk, and I discovered the ugly truth. She called him her special friend, and I saw red. I confronted them both, and the betrayal cut deep. My world shattered, and now I'm left picking up the pieces. This is my story of deceit, betrayal, and the fight to reclaim my life. Carol and I have been married for 16 years, and most of them have been great. We have a lovely 14-year-old daughter named Jenny. At first, we wanted another child, but Carol started using birth control, and we both got busy with our jobs. We were so happy with Jenny that we felt like one child was enough. I love my family a lot, and thought we had built a happy marriage and a close family. I've always felt lucky to have a smart and pretty wife. Sometimes, though, I worried that having such a beautiful wife might cause problems. I was always amazed that someone as beautiful as Carol would marry someone as plain as me. Whenever I talked about this, Carol would laugh. I guess I just felt sorry for you, Mark. You looked so sad when I first met you. I had to cheer you up. Well, you did a great job, I'd say with a smile. Since I met you, I've never felt sad again. I love you. I love you too, Mark. That playful talk always made us laugh. But recently, I've been thinking more about her answer. She was right. I was really sad when I first met Carol. I had just broken up with my girlfriend from college. I was heartbroken. We had been together for 3 years, and the breakup was tough. I later found out she met another guy from her hometown and wanted to see where it would go with him. There was no cheating, and she always said she had fun with me. But she didn't want a long-distance relationship since she was moving back home. She had met this other guy a couple of months before during a break in our classes. She said they hadn't done anything but wanted to break up with me before anything happened with him. I respected her honesty, though it still hurt. Before I met Carol, I finished college with a degree in accounting, got a job right away, and started my career. I dated a few girls but didn't meet anyone I really cared for. I didn't have much of a love life. None of the women at work interested me. I partied with friends sometimes, but my career was my life, and within a couple of years, I was making good money. Then one day, I was invited to a friend's house for a party. My friend Jim Simpson, who I've known since college, and his wife Martha had tried to set me up a few times. It was at one of these house parties that I met Carol. She was introduced to me, and we hit it off right away. Carol is tall, lively, with blonde hair, a pretty face, and a nice figure. Jim pointed her out and said she had just broken up with her boyfriend, too, and was single. She was so pretty that I found it hard to believe no one was with her. Carol was friendly and told me she was an art major about to graduate. She was not only beautiful and smart, but also funny, outgoing, and easy to talk to. We spent most of the party chatting. She agreed to go out with me the next weekend, and we started dating. Soon we were a couple. At first, she made it clear she was still seeing other guys. But after a few months, we became exclusive. At least I was. It took a little longer before I knew she only wanted to be with me. When I met Carol, I was already a CPA with a good job. I think the fact that I was making good money and could afford to take her to nice places helped in her decision to marry me. I know being financially stable was important to her. When I showed her my new home, my sports car, and took her to fancy restaurants, she was impressed. I'd like to think it was my looks and charm that attracted her. But honestly, I knew I was just an average-looking guy and pretty reserved. I believe she enjoyed our time together. I know I did. I found out she had more experience in relationships than I did. But I thought that once we were married, those past relationships didn't matter. She said they were in the past, that she loved me and only me. I believed her, and not long after I asked her to marry me. When she said yes, it was the happiest day of my life. My friend Jim had been close to me for years. We played sports and partied together. We lived in the same town and often met up to hang out. Jim was married then. But when his marriage to Martha started to fail, I tried to help him through it. I found out later he had been unfaithful, and Martha found out and hired a tough lawyer who made the divorce hard for Jim. Jim is a handsome, loud guy, much bigger than me. After he was single again, I saw that women were easily attracted to him. He dated many attractive women and often brought them over for parties and dinners, but none of his relationships lasted long. Carol and I talked about his problems, and she always pushed me to invite him over. She kept saying Jim was feeling down about his life and needed our support. That didn't make sense to me since Jim had no problem getting dates. Carol was sure we needed to be good friends to help him get over his bad memories from the divorce. I often told Carol she didn't need to worry about him so much. I didn't want to speak badly about my friend, so I never mentioned that he was dishonest and probably deserved the divorce. I mentioned Jim was a good-looking single guy with a good job and how women seemed to like him everywhere we went. Carol disagreed. She said he was just hiding his sadness about his broken marriage. She said he was our friend and we couldn't let him down. I agreed with her and kept our friendship going. Jim had been my best friend for years, and I was glad to have him around. This was how things were for several years. But a few months ago, things started to change. Jim came over often, as usual, but Carol kept talking about his supposed sadness. It was strange because Jim didn't seem sad at all. But Carol talked about it so much I thought it was normal. When things got even weirder at home, I got suspicious. I was working very hard as an accountant. But for the last couple of years, my career had stopped growing. I hadn't gotten the promotion I thought I deserved. I still had important clients and made decent money. I provided well for Carol, Jenny, and myself. Carol worked part-time at an art studio, making a little money. So our finances were stable, not getting better, but not getting worse either. The problem was, after 10 years at my firm, I wasn't earning what I thought I should, given all the hours I worked. I hoped for a raise, but when the economy got worse, upper management decided to lay people off. I kept my job, but my salary was cut. Luckily, Carol was still working, and our lifestyle was quite modest. The real trouble started when I told Carol we had to cut back on our expenses. When I mentioned canceling our annual vacation, she was shocked. I explained the situation and told her we also needed to cut down on other luxuries like dining out often. At the time, we usually went out every weekend for dinner, dancing, or a show. Carol didn't understand why our finances were so bad after so many years of work. I explained that my income had dropped and that a promotion wasn't likely anytime soon. Carol had always loved an active social life. She had many friends, some of them a bit snobby. She loved to dress up and go to fancy events. In the past, I went along with her wishes. But with my lower income, the big mortgage, car payments, and our daughter's education fund, we had to cut back somewhere. Carol wasn't happy when I told her we couldn't keep our high lifestyle. She was shocked when I suggested we stop going to pricey restaurants with her friends. This led to an argument and then a big fight about our future. At first, it didn't seem unusual when my friend Jim was around during some of these arguments. He was coming over several times a week, so it was inevitable he'd witness some of these discussions. It felt awkward when he seemed to take Carol's side. He wasn't obvious about it, but his comments always seemed to lean her way. Carol would ask his opinion on things, and he would think for a moment, then usually agree with her. He even offered to help us financially if needed. I didn't like that. He went further, offering to drive us out or pay for entry fees if we wanted to go to a club. If we were invited to a party, he even offered to buy a gift so we wouldn't go empty-handed. I thanked him but declined. I wanted to make my wife happy, but I was annoyed that he kept offering financial help. I knew he could afford it. He had left his previous job and was doing well in sales. One evening, Carol invited Jim over for dinner without telling me. This happened often now. As usual, she was a wonderful host. We had a pleasant conversation during the delicious meal Carol prepared. After our daughter left to do her homework, we moved to the living room and opened a bottle of wine. We hadn't even settled down before Carol reminded me about an upcoming charity event. I had forgotten about it, though we attended every year. I listened as she talked about our friends who would be there and how nice it was. I already knew about the event and how much it cost to attend. When I explained we couldn't afford it this month, Jim suddenly spoke up. He said he understood but noted it was for charity and it would be a shame not to contribute. Carol listened eagerly, her face lighting up. When Jim offered to help with the cost, she was thrilled. I, however, was angry. Jim knew our financial situation and my feelings about it. I expected my best friend to support me, but he didn't. Carol listened to my objections silently, then glared at me and glanced at Jim. They shared a look that made me very suspicious. "Come on, Mark," Jim said pointedly. You know this is something we do every year and we've never missed it. It would be a shame not to go just because of a few dollars. We had been attending for years, and I was disappointed too. But I knew we had to save money to pay the big mortgage bill that month. "We just have to go, honey," Carol said, patting my hand. "I know money's tight, but everyone we know will be there." Jim chimed in, "Mark, the guys would love to see you. They're all looking forward to it. It'll be great." Before I could reply, Carol said excitedly, "Remember how much fun we had last year, honey?" I shook my head no, and Carol frowned. With a determined look, she said, "I'm serious, Mark. We have to go. All our friends will be there, and I already talked to Mary and Gwen. I don't want them to think we don't support the charity. Everyone wants to help with charity, but I was thinking if we don't control our spending, we'll need charity ourselves." "It's just not in the budget this year," I said plainly. "Maybe next year." "But it'll be great," Jim said, smiling. "Of course it will be," Carol said. She pouted and turned to Jim. "But Mark doesn't want to go." Jim questioned my decision again. Before I could answer, Carol started complaining about how cheap I was. She pointed out several times she couldn't do what she wanted because of me. "See, Jim," she said, ignoring me. "I'm trying to have a good social life, but Mark's getting cheap as he gets older." Carol made me look bad. I tried to stay calm, but it was hard. "I'm not cheap, Carol. I'm just being realistic. We're in a tough spot. Spending money we don't have is a bad idea. I don't want us to stretch ourselves too thin." "But think of all the good we can do, honey," Jim added quickly. "You know it's for charity, right, Mark?" "Of course I do," I replied, frustrated. "But it's $75 a plate. Then there's the parking fee at the club. And after an expensive dinner we can't afford, there's the charity auction. We'll be expected to bid on items we don't need. Charity or not, we can't afford it." That led to an argument about my lower position at work and my reduced salary. Jim knew some of it, but these were private matters that embarrassed me. Carol smelled blood and really vented now. She openly complained to Jim about her disappointment and frustrations with our lifestyle. I admitted we had to cut back expenses to ensure Jenny's education and our mortgage payments. I hoped that would make Carol understand, but she didn't care. "See what I mean?" Carol sneered, looking hopefully at Jim. "He always finds a silly reason not to go out." I was angry. They were ganging up on me, ignoring my concerns. Carol looked at Jim, hoping for his support. Jim looked at her, then back at me with sympathy. "Well, Mark, why don't I cover you then?" he quickly offered. "I don't want to go alone, and I have the money. It's no problem. I'd be happy to take you and Carol out. We always have fun. I'd be disappointed if you weren't there. You've been there for me since my divorce. I'd love to take you both. I'll drive and even pay for the babysitter." "Really?" Carol squealed, thrilled that Jim was helping. "Oh gosh, Jim, that's wonderful. Thank you so much." Before I could reject his offer, she ran around the table, hugged him, and kept thanking him. I was boiling with anger. Not just because Jim countered my decision, but because Carol reacted so happily. She didn't care about my opinion and acted like Jim was her hero. I shot Jim a look of disapproval as Carol continued to hug him. Carol squealed, and Jim shyly accepted her thanks, while I sat there feeling furious. Despite what Carol said, I had no intention of taking anyone's charity, even from a friend. I was most upset by Carol's overly happy reaction. By now, Jim had his arm around her waist as she kissed his cheek. In no uncertain terms, I quickly rejected his offer. My pride wouldn't let me accept charity from anyone. They stopped hugging, and Carol gave me a cold look. "Come on, Mark," Jim said. "Don't be mad." He noticed I looked very angry and told me with a smile, "Let's just go and have fun. We can worry about the money later." "No way, I'm serious about this." Carol declared, "Oh, just be quiet, Mark. You can be mad all you want, but we're going and that's final." "We'll see about that." She looked at me like I was crazy. She got a strange look on her face, shook her head, and pulled away from Jim. Then she went to the kitchen, grabbed her phone, and called a friend. With Carol in the other room, Jim and I sat in silence. I glared at him as we both heard my wife talking excitedly on the phone. Jim looked a bit awkward as Carol chatted happily with her friend. "Oh, yes, we're going. I told you we would," she cried into the phone. "Oh, yeah, I know. Well, not really, but I told you we were." "I know what you thought, but I knew Jim would help us out. He's been such a good friend." "No, I don't think so, but you know how we can—" Her voice suddenly dropped, and I couldn't hear her anymore. Then Carol peeked into the living room and glanced at me with a smug look. She spoke softly into the phone as she walked back to the other room for privacy. After that talk, my friendship with Jim was broken. I thought, as my buddy, he would have taken my side. But he ignored me. He tried to explain he just wanted Carol and me to have a good time. But to me, he took sides, and it wasn't mine. Later, my wife came back with a huge smile. She thanked Jim again, hugging him and kissing his cheek. It seemed like she didn't want to let go of him. I told them again that we're not going, and that's final. Jim tried to speak up, and Carol kept hugging him, saying she was going, and that was it. I kept shaking my head no, but they didn't listen. I guess they wanted to change my mind before the event. Looking back, that fight might have been the start of the end of my happy marriage. The week before the charity event was cold in our house. Even our daughter Jenny noticed. She was 14, but she wasn't dumb. She knew about the event and sensed something wrong between Carol and me. "What's the matter, Dad?" she asked when Carol was out. "I know you and Mom are arguing. She wants to accept charity, and I don't." "Charity, like welfare or something?" "Not exactly, but it might as well be," I told her. "I wasn't raised to rely on others. It's a matter of pride, dear. Once you start, it's hard to stop. I never took charity and don't want to start now." "It's about that charity event, right?" "Yes. We can't afford it, Jenny. I'm not taking a handout just to show off." "But Mom said it's from Uncle Jimmy," she replied, watching my reaction. "He's your friend, right? I'm sure he doesn't see it as charity, just one friend helping another. Is that how your mother talks about it?" Jenny looked down. "Well, we talked about it. A little. No surprise. Carol was trying to get Jenny on her side. Knowing my clever wife was using my daughter to sway me made me mad." "I'm sure Mom told you everything," I said, trying to stay calm. "No matter if it's from a friend, it's still charity. I don't want you to think we're that desperate. My dad never took charity, even with bigger problems than we have." "But Dad, it's just a party. It's not like we're getting cash, and Uncle Jimmy is our friend." I got annoyed she kept saying Uncle Jimmy. That's how Carol must call him when I'm not around. I replied with more anger than I should have. "If your Uncle Jimmy," I sneered, "was really my friend, he'd keep his mouth shut, stay out of my business, and leave my family alone." My harsh reply scared Jenny, and she ran to her room and shut the door. I felt bad, but was tired of hearing about Uncle Jimmy and his help. I needed my family to back me up, but it didn't seem that way. Each day, Carol kept smirking at me. I insisted we weren't going to the charity event with or without Jim's help. Each time we talked, she gave me a dark look and we argued again. A few days before, Carol talked to me with clear anger. "Listen, Mark," she said, "I don't know why you're so mad about this. You know we go to this event every year and I don't want to miss it this year despite your work problems. I know we're having money issues, but we're not poor and we need to keep up appearances. If we don't go, all my friends will know we have problems. They'll gossip about us, and I don't want that. Jim offered to help, and if you're the man I married, you'll accept it with a smile." "That's it?" I shouted. "Now I'm not man enough?" "Oh, Mark, stop it. Of course you are. Just grow up." "So it's all about the gossip?" "Not all, but yes, I want us to look good. I want to be seen as a valued member of our group. We've made lots of friends, and I want to enjoy an evening with them. Don't you want to be seen with me?" "That's not fair. You know I want to be with you. I love you. But this fight makes me angry. I thought you'd support your husband and understand our situation. I can see that's not the case. So if you want to disrespect me, go without me." "You jerk!" she yelled. "You think I'm not a good wife? That's not fair. For 16 years, I've taken care of you and Jenny without complaining. I could have complained about many things, but haven't." "Like what, damn it?" She stared at me coldly. For a moment, she was silent. The quiet was deafening as I waited. "So you're going to fight about this?" she said bitterly. "I thought I could convince you that it would be good for us to have a night out together. We haven't done that in a long time. You haven't taken me out on a real date in months, and I'm tired of it." "That's not true. We go out to dinner as a family every week. We also go out dancing sometimes, just not to those fancy places you love. I told you, Carol, we can't afford that right now. Once Jenny's education is paid for, I'm sure things will get better." Carol looked angry as she listened to me. She took a deep breath and suddenly calmed down. but the look on her face was troubling. "So, my dear husband, if you won't take me out, then I guess I'll go out with Jim. I'm sure he'll be happy to have me, even if you're not. And don't think it's just a friendly date either. I'm going to give Jim all the attention I would have given you, and I know he'll appreciate it." "You've got to be kidding me," I snapped, feeling more anger than I had in a long time. "I should have known you were planning this. Don't let me stop you then. Go out with him, but don't think I'll forget this. And I'll remember Uncle Jim's part in this, too." I stomped out of the room and slammed the door as she yelled, "You jerk! I'm going!" Well, that didn't go well at all. As I stormed away, I passed the living room. Jenny was watching TV. I know she heard the whole argument because she looked up at me with fear in her eyes. I wanted to hug her and calm her down, but I was too angry at Carol to say anything nice. So I just went out to the patio and sat in a chair, seething. The day before the charity event, our house was full of tension. Jim called me a few times during the week to try and change my mind. I wasn't having it. And the last time he called, I just hung up on him. Our finances were not good, and we simply had to cut back. I had to face facts to keep our family secure, even if my wife wouldn't. If she wanted to make an issue about this, then she was going to get her wish. On the night of the event, I'm sure Carol made dinner, but I made sure to stay away and eat out at some cheap place. I got home after Jenny and Carol had finished eating. I mumbled a greeting, and Jenny said, "Hi, Dad." Carol didn't speak to me. She just went into the bedroom and locked the door as she got ready for her date with Jim. To avoid a scene, Carol decided to drive over to Jim's house and leave from there. When she came downstairs to leave, she strutted around the living room, showing off her outfit. If I wasn't angry before, I was furious now. She wore a short, tight aqua dress I had never seen before. It was shockingly brief and hugged her body. Her long hair was flowing, her makeup was perfectly done, and the high heels she wore made her legs look great. The charity event wasn't that fancy, so I was surprised to see her so dressed up. "Where'd you get that dress?" "Don't worry about it. Where'd she get the money to buy such a dress?" But she wasn't going to tell me, so I kept quiet. Carol ignored me as she went over to where Jenny was sitting in front of the TV, leaned down, and gave our daughter a kiss. "Wow, you look wonderful, Mom. You look like a movie star in that dress." "Thanks, dear." Carol's smile disappeared as she glanced pointedly over at me. She told Jenny loud enough for me to hear, "I know Uncle Jim will think so too. I just wish everybody felt the same way." Of course, that comment was directed at me, and I was furious. Unlike when we went out, Carol never looked this good on any of our dates. But for Uncle Jim, she made a big effort. I could see this was going to be a problem. I just looked at her with disgust and walked out of the room. I wanted her to know I was angry, and she definitely knew it. "Goodbye, Jenny," Carol said, walking to the door, speaking to my daughter and ignoring me. "I may be out late, honey, so don't wait up." She walked out the door and didn't look back. Jenny saw my sad face and shot me a look of pure pity, which made me even angrier. I knew she hated being in the middle of this, and I wasn't happy either. I marched to the den and quickly sent a text to my former best friend. "I thought we were friends, Jim. Now that you're going out with my wife, I know you're just another sleazy jerk. After tonight, don't bother contacting me and don't consider yourself my friend. You're not welcome here ever again. Enjoy your time with my wife, you jerk." I quickly got one back. "It's not a date, Mark, and you know it. I wanted you to come, but you're too stubborn. I'm just letting Carol have some fun, and then I'll make sure she gets home safe. We'll have to talk later. Please don't be upset with me." I replied, "Screw you." I didn't hear back. I tried to keep my mind off my wife, but it was impossible. Jenny and I watched TV for a while and tried to talk like nothing was wrong. I don't even know what we watched. She could tell I was upset. Jenny spoke kindly to me and tried to make me feel better. I was pleased about that. But it wasn't going to be a good night, and we both knew it. Around 10, Jenny went to bed. It was early for her. The situation was so awkward, I guess she couldn't take the tension. I could hear her talking on her cell phone with somebody when I went to bed. Somehow I managed to sleep, but I was woken up by the noise of the front door closing. I glanced at the clock and saw it was 2:30 in the morning. I could hear voices downstairs and knew it was my wife and my former friend. I rolled out of bed and glanced into the living room. Carol clung to Jim's arm near the front door. She was very drunk, her hair messy and her eyes half closed. She swayed a bit, giggling. "Thank you for a wonderful time tonight, Jimmy." She laughed, slurring her words as she hugged him tight. She wrapped her arms around his neck and gave him a long kiss on the lips. It lasted much longer than it should have, and Carol didn't seem to want it to stop. Finally, Jim pulled back, looking around nervously. "It was fun. But it's late, and you should get to bed now, Carol." "But I don't want to." "Go to bed. Mark might worry about you." "Forget him," she giggled. "He's boring, and I had so much fun with you tonight. Let's do this again, okay?" I was at the top of the stairs, hidden from their view. Jim seemed uneasy, glancing toward the hallway leading to our bedroom. He couldn't see me, but he probably wondered if I was there. "Let's not talk about that now," he said gently. "Go take a shower, get some sleep, and try to make up with your husband." "Forget that jerk," she slurred and leaned on him again. "Why don't you stay and have a drink with me? It's not that late." "No, I don't think that's a good idea. You know he's upset, right? I showed you his text earlier." "He's just mad and I don't care. Come on, let's go to the sofa. I'll get you a drink, please." "No, Carol. Not tonight." "Oh, come on." She murmured and pulled his head down for another kiss. This time it was more passionate before he gently pushed her away. "Please, Carol. I'm trying to keep us out of trouble." He chuckled awkwardly. "You're making this really hard." I was already furious, but my anger peaked when I saw her hand move between them and grab him. "I can tell you're interested," she giggled. "Come on, don't go yet." Jim smirked but pulled her hand away. "You better stop." "Come on, Jim, I know you want to stay. Let's go to the sofa, and I'll show you how much I appreciate tonight." "No, I'm serious, Carol," Jim said, looking worried. "You're a beautiful woman, no doubt, but I don't want to cause more trouble with Mark. We're friends, you know." "And you're my friend, too," Carol slurred, trying to pull him closer again. "Mark's asleep and doesn't care about me. I want you to be my special friend, Jim. Please stay for a little while." I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped into the room, anger clear on my face. "Yeah, Jim," I said sharply, shocking them both. "Why don't you be Carol's special friend?" Jim and Carol both jumped. In a sarcastic tone, I continued, "Why don't you stay and enjoy yourself with my drunk wife? After such a nice night, I'm sure she'd love that." Jim's eyes widened and his face fell. He pushed Carol away gently while she stared at me, trying to focus. "Listen, Mark," Jim started. "No, you listen. I can see just how much of a special friend you are to my wife. So just go ahead. Take her to the sofa and give her what she wants." Jim shook his head sadly and turned to leave. Carol cried out, "No!" and grabbed his arm, pulling him back. "Just shut up, Mark. Jim was nice to me all night, and he doesn't deserve this." "Then give him what he deserves," I shouted. "You want him, so go for it." "Damn you, asshole!" Carol screamed, her face red with anger. "Jim just wanted to disappear." "Listen, Mark," Jim said apologetically. "I know this looks bad, but nothing happened, and—" "Am I supposed to believe you?" I sneered. "I'm sure nothing happened?" "Yeah, nothing happened. It just looks bad." "Why does it look bad, Uncle Jim? Because my wife is all over you? Or because she wants you to stay?" Jim looked at Carol, then at me. He shook his head and headed for the front door. On the way, he said, "No, Mark, I have to go." He told my drunk wife, "I'll help you get your car later if you need it." He saw my glare and hurried out the front door. As it closed, Carol seemed to deflate. She looked drunk and sad as she stumbled into the kitchen for some water. I left her there and went back to bed. Our marriage felt like it was falling apart. Carol woke up on the sofa the next morning, sprawled out in her new dress. I tried to control my anger as I helped her to the bedroom and put her on the bed. I didn't undress her, but took off her high heels and covered her up. Carol slept until late afternoon, obviously hungover. I was still angry about her behavior with Jim, but decided not to show it right away. I wanted to see how she would react first. I knew our relationship had been struggling for a while. The argument about the charity event was just the latest issue. It was the biggest fight we had ever had. Carol came home for dinner and looked terrible. We didn't talk because she didn't want to. I stayed quiet, waiting for her to talk about what she did. She slept in the guest room, and the whole weekend we avoided each other. She was so drunk that I'm not sure she remembered much about that night. She usually doesn't drink, so what she had that night nearly knocked her out. Saturday morning, I made breakfast for Jenny and me. She mentioned Carol coming home with Jim and asked about the fight. I didn't explain much. I just said we're still upset about the charity event. Jenny accepted my explanation and left early. She said she was going to a friend's house. I asked her to call me in a few hours to check in. I went to work on Monday as usual. Carol took some time to recover and didn't go to work until Wednesday. We didn't talk about that night until the middle of the next week. I think it took her that long to clear her head from all the alcohol. She seemed embarrassed when she tried to apologize. I was still too angry to accept it. I let her say sorry, then walked away. That made her mad, but I didn't care anymore. Jim called me a couple of times. I ignored his calls and let them go to voicemail. I listened to his messages where he apologized and wanted to talk. He wanted to meet me, but I never answered. I'm sure he felt guilty about betraying me. I didn't care about him anymore. As far as I was concerned, our friendship was over. One evening, when I was washing the car, I went inside and heard Carol talking on the phone in the kitchen. She didn't know I was there, so I tried to listen. Yes, it was nice. I know he's still mad at me. Yeah, so what? Thanks. No, Mark didn't get it. It was Jim who bought it for me. Yeah, I know. It was expensive. He's so sweet and so good-looking. Carol was talking to one of her friends about Jim. Oh, Mark would be furious if he knew. No, you can't tell him. No, I have to keep that a secret. I hope he does. We're trying to figure out when. I know, but I have to be careful. Mark doesn't know. Yeah, he called me. He's been calling me all week. Of course I want to. Who wouldn't want to be with someone like Jim? You better not. I mean it. Okay. I know. She talked a bit more, but I had heard enough. I was almost sure she was planning to see Jim again. It was hard to believe how much our marriage had fallen apart in the last few weeks. I caught Carol on the phone a few more times. Whenever I came into the room, she'd either turn away and speak softly or hang up. On the weekend, Jim suddenly showed up at our house in his big SUV. I was in the driveway working on my car when he pulled up. He got out and walked up to our house with a smile, like everything was fine. Carol must have known he was coming because she immediately came outside with a strange smile on her face. We hadn't been speaking, so when she approached me and started to talk, I was on my guard. Hi, honey. I invited Jim over for dinner, she said directly. When I started to object, she held up her hand to stop me. Listen, Mark, I know what you're going to say. You're still upset about that night, but I think you two need to talk. Jim wants to. We need to get over this and be friends again. Jim was a few feet away, smiling as he came closer. Hi, Mark, he said cheerfully and held out his hand. Nice to see you, buddy. I just stared at him coldly. Trying to ease the tension, Carol moved next to me with a sweet smile and put her arm around my waist. She whispered, Go on, honey, with a big smile, trying to make me shake his hand. I let his hand hang in the air and ignored it. Jim's smile faded as he realized the insult and lowered his hand. Carol tried to soften the tense atmosphere. Hi, Jim, she said, ignoring my angry look. Nice to see you. I'm glad you came over today. I was just telling Mark it was time to clear the air and... Forget it, I snapped. Carol was startled. Her bright smile faded a bit. Please, Mark, Jim said. I know you're still upset, but... Oh, you got that, did you? I felt my wife's arm tighten around my waist. She cuddled against me, trying to keep me calm. Please, honey, Carol said softly, pressing my arm against her. She tried to kiss my cheek. Don't be mad at him. It's my fault, not his. Jim's been your friend for so long, and I know you miss him. He misses you too, right, Jim? That's right, Jim said. Come on, Mark. No hard feelings, right? I gave him a look that could kill. Then I pulled away from Carol's grasp. I looked straight into his eyes, furious. So tell me, buddy, did you have a good time with my wife at the charity event? Well, yeah, of course we did, Jim replied. Carol chimed in. We wanted you to come, Mark. It would have been more fun if you were there, honey. You would have loved it. She hadn't spoken to me in nearly a week, and now she was acting all sweet. I didn't believe her for a second. Jim looked at me uncertainly, and I stared straight into his eyes. So, did you dance with everyone? I asked. Yeah, everyone was dancing. Carol walked over and put her arm around me. She had a fake smile and said, Of course, Mark, everyone was dancing. It was fun. You would have liked it if you had come. I ignored Carol and kept my eyes on Jim. So, Jim, did you dance to the slow songs? Did you hold Carol close? His face twisted with confusion and discomfort. No, Mark, just normal dancing and having fun. Nothing wrong. I looked at him for a moment before turning to Carol. Is that true, Carol? Just friendly dancing? Yes, Mark. I would never do anything to disrespect you. I pulled out my phone and showed her a picture. A friend who was at the event sent me some suspicious photos. Carol took a moment to realize it was her and Jim dancing closely. Her face went pale with shock. So, Carol, dancing like this with Jim is just friendly? I laughed bitterly as she looked at the photo. Jim moved closer to see and then frowned. Where did you get this? He asked. It was a side shot of them dancing. Other couples were around, some looking amused at how close Carol and Jim were. He was much taller, but Carol had her arms around his neck, and Jim was leaning down to kiss her. It was just one picture, but it looked very suspicious. Carol's face looked horrified as she saw how close they were. Jim gulped, "Oh, boy." I showed the next picture. Carol, were you enjoying that kiss? It was a closer shot, showing them looking into each other's eyes with Jim's hands around her waist. A couple nearby was smiling at them. I showed another picture of them sitting in a booth. Jim's arm was around her, and Carol was leaning on his shoulder looking up at him. The last picture showed them outside on a patio hugging. Jim's hand was on her back. They seemed about to kiss again. Both Jim and Carol looked shocked. Jim's face turned red, and he made choking sounds as he tried to speak. Carol seemed to recover first. Who sent you these? Does it matter? Mark, I know this looks bad, but it's not what it seems. Really, Carol, it looks like you were very close with Jim, maybe more than friends. Jim cut in, No way, Mark. We were just having fun. Had too many drinks. Carol added, Yes, Mark. It's my fault. I drank too much and got a bit too close, but nothing serious happened. Did you get a good feel for him, Carol? Her mouth dropped open. Jim frowned. That's not fair, Mark. Not fair! I shouted. My wife glanced around, worried someone might hear. I hoped they would. Please, Mark, not so loud. Can we talk inside? No way! I yelled. I don't want Jim in my house ever again. I turned to her. Carol, where did you get that green dress? The one with the low neck? I can't afford it, and I doubt you can. Carol looked shocked and said nothing. Jim looked guilty. No answer? I turned to Jim. Did you buy her that dress? Don't try to lie, you jerk. Well, he started to say, glancing over at Carol. My wife stopped him with a wave and said softly, Yes, he did, Mark. Her eyes lowered. I needed something nice to wear, and I hadn't bought anything new in ages. The dress was a gift from Jim, and I knew you wouldn't like it, so I decided not to tell you. And those high heels you were wearing? The ones that made you 5 inches taller and made you look like a cheap streetwalker? Come on, Mark, Jim said with irritation. They're not like that. Carol's red face and darting eyes told me all I needed to know. I see exactly how it is, I snapped at her. He bought you that night and you tried to thank him later. You know that's what people who sell their bodies do, right? He paid for you, and you tried to be with him. Carol's shame seemed to swallow her. Her face grew hard and her eyes blazed. Jim tried to say, Please, Mark, there's no need for this now. I turned to him and shouted, You're making my wife look bad and you have the nerve to say there's nothing wrong? You're a real jerk. I wish you were gone. Both of you. One of our neighbors was watching from their porch. Carol noticed we had an audience. She blushed and looked embarrassed. I had nothing more to say to them and jumped into my car to leave. Jim moved quickly and tried to grab my arm. When he pulled me back, I twisted around and took a swing at him. I missed, and he shoved me to the ground before I could try again. He could have knocked me out with one punch. The guy is taller and bigger than me by at least 40 pounds. Not only bigger, but more muscular and athletic. A physical fight would only make me look foolish. I got up and brushed myself off as he held his hands up, trying to calm me down. As for making my wife look bad, I said, glancing at Carol with disgust. Well, jerk, you're doing a great job. She was staring at me with a shocked expression. The neighbors on the porch were clearly interested now. Another couple from down the street was walking by and were watching closely. You're with him now, I yelled loud enough for our audience to hear. He paid for your dress, your high heels, and your night out, so just take him inside and give him what he wants. Isn't that what you wanted to do that night? I moved toward my car, and this time he didn't stop me. Another neighbor peeked out their door, wondering about the noise. Carol was blushing even more as she noticed we had an even larger audience now. One thing I learned about her recently was how important her reputation was to her. This public fight was probably killing her. "Mark, please stop it, honey," she pleaded in a whisper. "Don't go away yet. It's not like that. Let's go inside and talk this out." "Yeah, Mark, we really need to clear the air, man," the jerk agreed. I looked at them both like they were dirt on my shoe. "Yeah, I want to finish this," I told him bitterly. "So if you're still here when I get back, I'm going to get my gun and make you leave. You clear about that?" Jim gazed at me in silence. Carol looked sad and angry. I spit at their feet, jumped in my car, pulled out of the driveway, and sped off, tires screeching. Our neighborhood would have juicy gossip for months. When I got home that night, Jim was gone. Carol was in bed, and I was very drunk. I had a cab bring me home because I was too drunk to drive, and the bartender wouldn't let me leave with my car keys. I fell onto the sofa and didn't wake up until about noon the next day. I quickly called in sick to work. My boss was mad, but there was no way I was able to work being so hungover. I also took the next day off because I still wasn't feeling right. I finally woke up and got some food in my stomach. That seemed to help. Carol was gone to her part-time job at the art gallery, and Jenny was at school. I guess I was feeling a little guilty about my behavior. I don't know why, though. I still blamed Carol and Jim for the problem. When Jenny returned home from school, I apologized for my loud fight. She acted like it was no big deal, but I knew she had probably seen the whole thing and heard everything I said to her mother and Uncle Jimmy. We spoke about it for a while and then left it alone. I fixed dinner before Carol got home. She wasn't home on time, and Jenny and I ate dinner without her. I was still mad, but my hangover softened my anger a bit because when my wife finally did make her appearance, I didn't fight with her again and just left her alone. We ate, cleaned up the dishes, and went to sleep that night without touching each other or even speaking. The next day, we tried to act normal for Jenny's sake, and the atmosphere around the house was a bit better. She did make sort of an apology, saying she was sorry I didn't attend the event, and no matter how bad those pictures looked, nothing inappropriate went on between Jim and her. I noted that she didn't say she was sorry she went, just that she was sorry how it worked out. I let her speak and didn't offer an answer. A few days later, I heard her on the phone again. She thought I was in the backyard and didn't notice I was around the corner when she was speaking openly. "It's okay." "Yeah, I can talk. He's out in the yard. No, he's still really upset about everything. I don't want to approach him about that yet. Yeah, well, you know I do. Maybe if we are careful we can... I don't know. I just don't want to stir up any more trouble." She listened for a bit, then said, "He won't be so forgiving next time. Okay, yeah, I'll call you later. Of course, I miss you. We can't. No, please, I know. Just let me talk to him first. Okay, right. I'll work on him tonight and get back to you. Maybe tomorrow. I can't talk right now. He was in the yard earlier, but I don't know where he is now. Okay, that's fine. Call me, okay? Bye." She hung up the phone. I felt something was off, but I wasn't sure what. I thought she was talking to Jim, but I couldn't be certain. Funny thing, Jim called me that evening. It was just after dinner and I was on the patio. It was Friday and Jenny was at a friend's place for a sleepover, so she'd be back on Saturday afternoon. I saw Jim's name on the caller ID and hesitated. Carol came out just then. "Is that your phone, honey?" she asked as it rang. Now I knew it was a setup. "Why don't you answer it, Mark?" I grunted and picked up the phone. "What do you want?" I muttered, knowing it was Jim. "Hey, buddy, just wanted to talk," he said cheerfully. Carol watched me as I replied, "Oh yeah? Well, I want a faithful, loving wife, so what?" "Listen, Mark, I know things have been tense. I wanted to do something to break the ice." I didn't answer. "I'm having a small get-together at my place. Want to invite you and Carol. Just a few friends, all nice folks from the area, you know. I'll be grilling, so you don't need to bring anything. Just show up and have a good time." I stayed silent, thinking about his offer. Truth is, I had felt a bit regretful the past few days. Despite my anger, I still loved Carol. I knew she missed our social life and wished I could make her happy again. Jim used to be my best friend. Despite my feelings, I missed hanging out with him. I saw Carol was nearby, pretending not to listen, but it was obvious. I don't know. "Please, Mark, I know how you feel, but we can't keep on like this. Let's make peace for a bit and have a few beers with friends. Bring Carol. Maybe we can move past this." I glanced at Carol. She looked over and smiled. "We'll see. I'll talk to Carol and we'll see. Hope you come, both of you. It's casual. I've got the food and beer covered. I think you'll have a blast. Hope to see you." I put down the phone and Carol immediately asked, "Who was that, honey?" "Nobody." Carol looked puzzled. "Nobody? Tell me who?" she asked, pretending she didn't know. "Jim's having a party," I said calmly. "Oh, really?" she said, smiling. "That's nice." "Yeah, he wants us to go. He wants to make peace." Carol seemed eager to speak, but just smiled and asked, "So what did you tell him? Are we going?" "I guess so." She jumped up and hugged me close. It had been so long since we hugged, it felt warm and familiar. "Oh, good, that's great, Mark," she gushed. "I know we'll have a great time." "Don't count on it," I snorted. She kissed my cheek and rushed inside to get ready. I was unsure about the whole thing, but tired of all the fighting and willing to see how it turned out. Either way, Carol couldn't say I wasn't trying to fix things. As for Jim and me being friends again, that was doubtful. The party was quite nice. Around 30 people were there, more than I expected. Jim really went all out with food and drinks. Most were married couples with a few single people. There were enough folks that it wasn't obvious I was avoiding Jim. Carol stayed by me a lot of the time. She did go off with friends for a while. I hung out with some of the guys. I drank some beer, but not too much. I wasn't going to act like everything was normal again. Carol noticed I was still distant. "Is everything okay?" she whispered. I didn't look at her as I mumbled, "Yeah, nice party." "Isn't it, though? I'm having fun. I hope you are, too," she said, looking into my eyes. Then she asked quietly, "Have you talked to Jim?" My face darkened, and she noticed. "Sorry. I didn't mean to upset you, Mark." "Then just leave it alone. You two were such good friends. I hope you will be again." "Forget it, Carol," I told her sternly. "Jim and I will never be friends again. He's a jerk and always will be. Let's just enjoy tonight and not bring up bad memories." Carol didn't drink much, and neither did I. Jim was busy being the host and only came over a couple of times to check on us. He had a woman with him, someone he knew from work. Carol went over to talk with them, and she brought Jim's date over to introduce me. I just nodded and let Carol do the talking. I don't even remember her name. She probably thought I was rude, but I didn't care. After a few awkward minutes, they went to the bar to mix some drinks. Later, Jim put on some music and people started dancing. Carol asked if I wanted to dance. I said no. She looked a bit sad, but didn't argue. As the sun set, the couples with kids left, and the remaining crowd drank more. Some more people arrived and joined in. The party got louder. Several wives we knew were dancing with other guys. A few men asked Carol to dance. She accepted after checking with me. I stayed in my seat and watched her quietly. Carol is a beautiful woman, so I wasn't surprised when she kept getting asked to dance. She danced to the fast songs, showing off her moves. When the slow songs played, she kept looking at me. Usually she was very flirty at these events, but tonight she didn't flirt much and didn't dance close with anyone. She seemed to enjoy herself, but wasn't as touchy as I'd seen her with Jim at the charity event, and she didn't dance with Jim. When she saw I wasn't getting involved in the party's vibe, she stopped dancing and came to sit by me. Carol left my side to chat with her friends. Then, Jim's date came over and asked me to dance. I said no, trying to be polite. She pouted and then asked if I wanted another beer. I declined again. She was young and pretty like the girls Jim always had around him, but I wasn't interested. I tried to show her I didn't want to talk, but she sat next to me, took a gulp of her beer, grinned, and started a conversation. Since she wouldn't leave, I chatted with her to be polite. She seemed a bit drunk and laughed a lot at things that weren't funny. She kept touching my arm and leg and offered to get me another beer, which I kept refusing. She wanted me to dance, but I didn't want to. She stood up and pulled on my arm, making a big scene. Everyone was laughing at my hesitation. Embarrassed, I asked her to stop. She did for a bit, then did it again and, accidentally, fell onto my lap. I tried to lift her up, but she fought it and stayed there, laughing and rubbing against me. I removed her arms and stood her up. As I did, I saw Jim and Carol watching me. Suddenly, I knew what was going on. The whole party was a trap. They wanted me to act like they did at the charity event. This girl was trying to get me to behave badly so I couldn't criticize them. I shot my wife a harsh look. She saw it, cringed, and knew I was onto their plan. I kept pushing the girl away. When she wouldn't stop bothering me, I pushed her off my lap. People laughed as I walked away. I walked by Jim and said, "Nice try." He looked angry as I left. A bit later, Carol came over, probably to deny everything. I didn't want to hear lies. When she started talking, I gave her a sharp look. The party was still going strong when I told her it was time to leave. She looked sad but didn't argue. I didn't thank Jim and walked straight to my car. Carol said it was rude not to thank him, so she went to talk to Jim and his date. Jim looked at me strangely while they talked. I was glad he didn't come over because I didn't know what I would do. Carol said goodbye to her friends. She wanted to stay because the party was still lively, but she respected my wish and we left quickly. The drive home was quiet. Carol talked about how much fun she had and how nice everything was. I just nodded and kept silent. She chatted about her friends and how well Jim had set things up. My silence made the ride feel tense. The whole evening was planned. Jim's invitation, Jenny's sleepover, and his girlfriend trying to embarrass me. They were manipulating me, and it made me angry. But I kept quiet, and Carol was happy I didn't make a scene. At home, my wife started being very affectionate. She was sweet, touching, and kissing me all the way to the bedroom. It had been over a month since we were close. Even though I was mad, Carol is very attractive. Tonight, she was dressed to please. I wanted to refuse her, but my body reacted. Carol is very affectionate when she wants to be. She really knows how to make me feel good, and she did that night. We kissed, and then she did things to make me more excited. She then climbed on top of me, and we were together. I was so focused on my pleasure that I didn't know if she was too. As we finished, she thanked me for being a good husband. After she fell asleep, I lay in the dark, thinking about the party. I remembered her dancing and talking to Jim. It was all set up. They were playing me. I thought over every moment and how Carol seemed so happy talking to Jim. I also remember the night Carol decided to go out with Jim. When she came home, she was very happy to hug and kiss him. She was eager to get him on the sofa. I know she was drunk and in the mood, but something about their friendly relationship felt off. Jim's reaction bothered me too. He looked like he enjoyed kissing my wife, but he seemed worried about where they were. I'm not sure he would have stopped if Jenny and I weren't there. Jim has been a friend for many years. But the way he was with my wife felt wrong. Have they done this before? Maybe this wasn't the first time. I tried to push away these thoughts because I wanted to trust Carol, and I used to trust Jim too. But a small voice in my head told me to be careful. During dinner, Carol was really excited about the party we went to. She didn't mention the charity event at all. Jim called me a few times after the party, but I didn't answer. He left a message saying he was glad we came over and wanted to hang out again soon. He wanted us to be friends again and said he would make the effort. I told Carol that Jim was calling me, but I wished he wouldn't. She seemed happy to hear that we had contact. She asked if we could invite him over for dinner. When I said no, Carol frowned and we had another argument. She told me to get over my hissy fit and kept reminding me what a good friend Jim was and how he had helped us. I knew Jim was good at his job and made more money than me. I was tired of hearing her praise him so much, but I didn't say anything. Carol probably thought everything was back to normal between us. Jenny might have thought so too. Carol and I had some more makeup time together. She talked about Jim as if he was still my friend. But I wasn't ready to accept that. Still, I kept quiet to keep things peaceful at home. That was a mistake. I tried to keep track of what Carol was doing, but since she worked part-time and I was very busy with my job, it was hard. She was home every night when I got there, and she always made dinner for Jenny and me. The closeness we had after Jim's party went away fast. We were together a few more times, but Carol wasn't into it. She seemed distracted, like she was just going through the motions. Of course, I felt good, but the little kisses and touches weren't there anymore. I was sad about our fading relationship, but my job took up so much of my energy that I didn't have the patience to address it. Carol didn't seem bothered. She kept the house neat, took care of Jenny, and once a week she would let us be together. It was barely making love now, just physical. But I guess I should have been happy for that. One night I got off work early and wanted to take Carol out for dinner. Early for me meant getting home before 6 o'clock. It would be a late dinner for us, but I thought I could arrange for Jenny to stay over at her friend's house. Our finances were tight, but I thought we needed some time to reconnect. It had been weeks since we went on a real date. I called home, but Carol wasn't there. So I called her at work that afternoon, and a woman answered, telling me Carol wasn't available. Oh, all right. Will she be available later? I asked. Not today. She took the afternoon off, she said. She should be back on Monday. Can I take a message? No, I'll try her then. I was confused. She wasn't at work, she hadn't called me, and never mentioned that she had plans to take the day off. I called her cell phone, but it went to voicemail, so I left a message. Hi, Carol. Just wanted to ask you out for dinner tonight. I miss taking you out and would love to take you to a nice place. Please call me back and I'll make all the arrangements. Normally I got home by 7 or later. I guess she expected me then. But I was upset when she didn't call me back until nearly 6 o'clock. It was too late to make arrangements for Jenny. Hi, Mark, she said cheerfully. Sorry I missed your call, honey. I wanted to take you out, I sighed. I guess now it's too late. Oh, I'm so sorry, baby. I had to meet with a client, you know. It ran a little late, so I couldn't get back to you. Okay, then. See you at home. Right. Love you. Love you, too. The conversation was odd. Meet with a client? When did Carol start meeting with clients? Her coworker never mentioned that. Why take the day off, and why was her phone off? I hardly ever called during the day, so she had no reason to expect me to. But the whole thing made me feel uneasy, and I wasn't sure why. I picked up some pizza and went home. When I got there, both Carol and Jenny were waiting. Jenny was happy about the pizza, and Carol apologized for missing my call. I didn't question her about it, but it felt strange and made me think bad thoughts. That night, Carol told me there was a big party at the Royal Hotel this weekend, and she wanted to go. It's going to be wonderful, Mark, she said excitedly before seeing my unhappy look. Oh, don't look at me like that. I know what you're thinking, she quickly added. Don't worry, honey. It's not going to cost you anything. There's no cover charge for this, and my company is paying for the dinner and drinks. It's a public relations thing to attract customers. There's also going to be a band, dancing, and everything. We're going to have a great time. This weekend? Are you sure we're free this weekend? Carol gave me a goofy grin and laughed. Oh, stop it, you spoil sport. I know we really need this. We haven't been anywhere in ages. And don't worry, it won't cost us a penny. I listened quietly as she talked excitedly about the party. I wished I could find a way out of it, but she had already made up her mind. I just hoped everything would go fine. Even though I wasn't too thrilled, I was kind of looking forward to taking her to this party. My wife is very beautiful and fun. I thought about taking her to a nice dinner and maybe some dancing. We needed a night out together, and maybe this party was the chance. Little did I know what was coming. The night before the party, she dropped a bombshell on me. As she talked about the details of the party, she mentioned, almost suspiciously, and you know Jim's going to be there too, honey. Jim, are you serious? I had no idea. We were finishing dinner and Jenny was already in her room. Carol was just staring at her plate, pushing her food around with her fork. Yes, honey. Jim mentioned he'd be there. I asked in shock, You spoke to him? When? She looked surprised for a second, but then quickly calmed down. I heard it from someone at work, she said without looking up. Why is Jim going to be there? I think he's dating one of the clients. You mean the woman he had at his party? No, not her. Someone else, I think. Jim's going to be there? I repeated angrily. Then I asked, Tell me the truth, Carol. Have you talked to him about this party? She glanced at me with a guilty look and mumbled, No, not really. I just heard something. Maybe. I forget. He called you, didn't he? I felt a knot in my stomach. I guess. Maybe. She said as her attitude suddenly changed to annoyance. Yes, he called me. He did. So what? You know I don't like him, I spat. Now I find out you're talking to him behind my back? It's not like that, she answered. He's a friend. He just called to say he'd be there and hoped we would too. I stood up angrily. I threw the rest of my food into the trash and rinsed off my plate. That's just great, I sneered. After all we've been through, you're talking to him behind my back. He's our friend, Mark. My friend too, she said defensively. He's no friend of mine, and you're calling him and probably meeting up with him behind my back. Her eyes met mine as she said firmly, You can't tell me who to talk to. I'm an adult, and I can choose my friends. I was just being polite, letting you know he'd be there. I didn't want you to think it was some setup. Can't you see that? Yeah, I see it. I already told you that I want you to stop talking to him. I guess you don't care about my feelings. That's not true. Just stop having any contact with him, okay? No! Damn it, Mark! I'll talk to him if I want, she replied sharply. He's a friend, and I will not shut him out. If you want to ignore Jim, that's your choice, but I'm not turning my back on a friend. So that's it. Yes, she said softly, placing her hand on mine. I don't want you to be mad. I want my husband back. Please come to this party with me. All my friends will be there. It's important to me, honey. I left it at that. I was going, but I wasn't happy about it. On the night of the party, I drove Jenny to her friend's house. She was going to stay the night so Carol and I could enjoy the party as late as we wanted. Carol spent most of the evening getting ready. She had her hair and makeup done. I just had to put on a suit and shoes, which took me about 10 minutes. Carol took over an hour in the bedroom. When she came down, she looked stunning in a black cocktail dress that fit her perfectly. A dark thought crossed my mind. Where did you get that dress? I've never seen it before. Carol gave me a smirk and said, I bought it with my own money, Mark, so don't get upset about where it came from. I do make money, even if it's not as much as you. I also bought the shoes, if you're wondering. I tried to control my anger, but it was hard. Her long legs were shown off by the short dress. The high heels made her calves flex with every step she took. The dress was low-cut, showing a bit of cleavage. You ready? She asked, slipping her arm in mine. Let's go out on the porch and wait for Jim. My jaw dropped. Jim! I gasped. What do you mean? Jim's going to pick us up and take us there, she said, as if I already knew. That way you can drink if you want. But what? Why? I stuttered. This is crazy. We can just drive over there. I don't need to go with him. Carol looked at me firmly and said, I already talked to him and he's coming over right now. You talked to him? My God, but why? I wasn't sure if you were going, she said, her blue eyes locking with mine. You were so difficult at the last event that I wasn't sure if you'd stand me up again. You took Jenny away, and I was worried you might bail on me. There's no way I was going to miss this party. So in case you backed out, I called Jim, and he said he'd take me. Take you? Was he going to take you without me? No. I mean, I didn't want to miss it, Mark. I was furious. Just as I thought, Carol was making plans with this guy behind my back again. It was just like last time. I know you didn't want to go, she explained calmly. I thought you might try to leave me hanging. Jim's a gentleman, and he said he would take me if you didn't show up. So he's on his way over right now. Mark, if you want to go, be ready in 10 minutes or we're leaving without you. Damn it! I shouted back, getting more annoyed. So you weren't going to wait for me, huh? Fine, go with Jim then. Maybe I don't want to go anyway. Carol's face turned red with anger. She stomped into the kitchen, fury in every step. Do what you want, you jerk! She yelled over her shoulder. I heard her pouring a glass of wine. I sighed and tried to understand the sudden change in plans. I went to the bathroom to wash my face and calm down. The doorbell rang while I was there. Jim must have arrived. Carol let him in and I could hear them talking. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but it annoyed me that Jim was so involved again. Instead of confronting him, I decided to go downstairs and try to ease the tension. They were already in Jim's BMW with Carol in the front seat. I walked over and Jim rolled down the window with a smile. Hi, Mark. I'm glad you and Carol are joining us tonight. He offered his hand to shake, but I ignored it. A month of arguments with my wife had worn me down. I wasn't ready for another fight and maybe more cold days. I decided to just go along with it and talk to Carol later. No hard feelings, right? Jim said, still smiling. Yeah, sure, I mumbled, brushing his hand away. With Carol in the front, I was stuck in the back seat. Jim kept talking about how he hoped we could all have a good evening. I sat there, feeling more and more upset, wondering if I should have come at all. Carol chatted away, not even looking back at me. Jim apologized, saying he was worried we'd be late. I just nodded, accepting it reluctantly. The evening was awful for me. Carol and Jim seemed to have a great time. She looked stunning in her black dress and high heels. Jim looked sharp in his tuxedo. I felt dull in my simple suit. Carol's friends made a big fuss over her and Jim. I was ignored while my wife enjoyed all the attention. I mostly spent the night alone. Dinner was okay. We sat at a big table with other couples. Carol sat between Jim and me but barely spoke to me. She asked me a few simple questions, but her attention was on Jim. He tried to include me in the conversation a few times, but I gave short replies. When the music started, Carol let me dance with her a few times. She didn't seem happy about it. When we were slow dancing, she told me I better behave, or there would be no affection for the rest of the month. That hurt. My wife can be very mean sometimes. From her glares, I knew she was still mad. Carol spent a lot of time dancing with other guys, especially Jim. She's popular with her co-workers, and the guys couldn't resist dancing with her. Her dress showed off her great figure. I watched sadly, hoping for a chance to be close to her later. But it didn't happen. Jim eventually took us home. He and Carol hugged for a long time at the door. By the time she came up to bed, she was back to giving me the cold shoulder. I just went to sleep while she showered. The next day, things were still tense. Carol had a bit of a hangover. I took our daughter, Jenny, to her soccer games. She won, so we went for pizza to celebrate. I called Carol to invite her, but she didn't answer. I tried her cell, but it went to voicemail, too. Maybe she was still resting. When Jenny and I got home, Carol was on her cell phone, smiling, but when she saw me, her smile vanished. She quickly ended the call. She interacted normally with our daughter, but pulled away when I tried to kiss her. Carol continued to be distant. We only talked about basic things like schedules and chores. There was no warmth. I tried to kiss and touch her, but she wasn't interested. Work was tough, too. My boss had me working late most nights, so I wasn't home as much as I wanted. One evening, I came home early and found Jim in the kitchen with Carol. I nearly lost it, but they barely reacted. When I asked why he was there, he said Carol needed help with some boxes. Since I wasn't around, she asked him to help. Jim said it was no trouble as it was on his way home. I accepted the explanation and went upstairs to shower. When I came back down, he was gone. That week at work was really hard. I was desperate to keep the peace at home. Somehow, Carol seemed okay with Jim being back in our lives. Anytime I complained, it led to a big argument. A couple of times when I got home late, I found out Jim had already eaten dinner with my family. While I ate the leftovers, Jenny excitedly told me Jim had given her a new pair of sneakers. Another time, she said he bought her a jacket. Each time she talked about him, she seemed very happy to have him around. Carol felt the same way. One evening, I got home and Carol had made a great meal. Jim was there again. They were all chatting loudly when I walked in. Carol glanced at me without speaking, almost daring me to make a fuss. When I didn't, they went back to their conversation, ignoring me as I sat down to join them. Around then, I started to feel like an outsider in my own home. Carol and I were talking, but barely, and we weren't close anymore. I couldn't help feeling that Carol really didn't care if I was there or not. If Jim was there when I got home, he acted friendly and asked me about my work. He acted like he wanted to know how things were going, so I replied, not wanting to make a fuss about his presence. But soon, I began to resent how often he was around, and how eager my whole family seemed to be accepting him there. One evening, after a particularly long visit, I took Jim out onto the back patio to talk to him. I told him I was uncomfortable with him being around so much and that if he came over from now on, I'd like a phone call first. He listened quietly, looking at me with a strange, disinterested expression. He said no problem, that he didn't want to cause any issues and he'd respect my wishes from now on. I thought that was the end of it. Boy, was I wrong. That night when Carol and I got into bed, I remembered how she had been during dinner, happy, chatting, and laughing at things Jim said. I also thought about my conversation with Jim. I'd been working late a lot, and Carol and I were not spending much time together. Something inside told me that I needed to reconnect with my wife. Since she was in such a good mood, I thought tonight was a good time to start fixing our relationship. After dinner, I helped my wife clean up. She seemed to be in an unusually good mood, and we were talking normally for a change. Jenny went to bed, and I followed my wife to the bedroom. I tried to make hints to my wife about wanting to be close. I knew she could tell I was interested, but she didn't respond. She didn't shut me down, but she wasn't interested either. When she finished getting ready for bed, she came out of the bathroom wearing her long flannel nightgown, which was her way of saying she wasn't interested in anything physical. Once she was under the covers, I moved closer and snuggled against her. My hand landed on her stomach, and I felt her stiffen. When I placed my hand on her chest, she immediately pushed my hand away and turned over on her side with her back facing me. Normally, I'd just give up, but I was upset about Jim always being around, and it had been quite a while since Carol and I were close. I decided to ignore her unspoken rejection and moved closer, hoping she'd change her mind. I held her hips and tried to get her attention. "Honey, you look so nice tonight," I told her softly. "Not tonight, Mark," she said. When I didn't stop, she repeated, "I said not tonight. I'm tired. Maybe some other time, okay?" I was hurt by her rejection. It had been weeks since we were close. I wasn't taking no for an answer. "Come on, baby, it's been a while. You know how much I care about you." She pushed my hand off her and said again, "Not tonight." I kept trying to hold her until she turned around and said in a harsh tone, "Will you stop? I said I was tired, and I meant it." "What the heck, Carol?" I snapped back. "You've been pushing me away for weeks now. What am I supposed to do?" "I'm just tired. Please don't make a big deal about this." I sat up and threw the covers back. I looked down at her angrily. "What's going on, Carol?" I turned on the light next to our bed and said, "We haven't been close in over a month. You've been distant and mean for weeks. Is there something wrong with you? With me? You may have forgotten, but I'm still your husband, and you have to talk to me." I guess my angry tone finally got through. She turned over and looked up at me, her blue eyes flashing with anger. "You jerk!" she snapped. "I told you I'm tired, but you don't seem to care about how I feel, do you? I take care of the kids and the house, and I wait for you. But you never take me out. You never bring me flowers anymore, or even come home on time. Now you just want to be close and then go to sleep." I was caught off guard by her bitterness. I moved back from her angry outburst as she sat up and pointed her finger at me. "You selfish jerk. I've given up so much and you just want something from me," she yelled. I stared at her, wondering who this angry person was lying next to me. "Well," she said, glaring at me, "don't just sit there with a stupid look on your face. What you wanted is not happening tonight. Get to it already, you idiot! I want to sleep!" I was shocked, feeling a mix of emotions. Of course, I was a bit attracted to her, but the angry look on her face pushed me away. She glared at me like she hated me. There was no love at all. I decided to just lie back down and forget it. But Carol didn't want to stop. She kept going. She saw that I wasn't in the mood anymore. "Come on, Mark," she said with a strange grin. "What's wrong? Can't handle it now? Jim wouldn't turn me down. You're such a loser. You can't get it up if the woman isn't perfect. Well, are you ready?" She smiled and laughed in a mean way. Then she covered herself with the blanket. I heard her whisper loudly, "Loser." Her last words made me very angry. She had been mean to me before, but this was the worst. Something inside me snapped. "You witch!" I yelled. "I guess you're Jim's girl now." I jumped out of bed and headed for the door. Behind me, she screamed, "You jerk! At least he's not a loser like you!" I stormed out of the room before I did something I might regret. I slammed the door so hard that it shook the whole house. I felt bad thinking Jenny might have woken up from the noise. I was so angry. This was worse than the night after the charity event. The next morning, I woke up still upset. Carol didn't say anything about the night before, and neither did I. She made breakfast for Jenny, and I left the house without a word. I barely slept and was still very angry. I knew something was seriously wrong with our marriage. A couple of days later, I came home from work and saw Jim's car in the driveway. I was not happy about that. I hoped Carol and I could talk tonight and have dinner without him around. So seeing him here made me upset. Since the night we argued, we hadn't spoken. I knew she was unhappy, and so was I. I hoped we would talk and get over it. But it hadn't happened yet. I thought maybe it could happen tonight. When I saw his car and knew he hadn't called, I was disturbed. I would have to remind him of his promise later. But I also knew Carol liked having him around. Maybe his visit would help ease the tension between us. A friendly dinner could help things. Maybe Carol and I could even talk again if things calmed down. I entered the house and saw them together on the sofa. "Hi, honey," I called out. I looked at him and said quickly, "Jim." "Hello, Mark," he replied softly. "What's for dinner?" I asked Carol as I hung up my jacket. She looked at me with a blank stare. There's roast beef and veggies in the fridge you can heat up. She spoke calmly, pointing to the recliner. But first, can you sit down here? We need to talk. We? That was strange. I stayed standing, surprised by her tone and distant look. I wondered what she wanted to tell me. Maybe something bad had happened. What's up, honey? Where's Jenny? She's at Becky's for a sleepover. On a school night? You didn't tell me? Ignoring my question, Carol asked, Would you like a drink, Mark? Wine or beer? No, I'm fine. She showed little emotion, and I noticed how close she and Jim were on the sofa. Usually they'd be at the kitchen table when I got home. The close seating was unusual. Carol took a sip of her wine and then turned to me. There's something we need to discuss, Mark. Please, have a seat. She pointed to the recliner again and glanced at Jim. He gave her a small nod. What's going on here? I blurted out, feeling uneasy. Please sit down, she said more firmly. With a sense of dread, I sat across from them. Mark, there's no easy way to say this. She took a breath and continued. You know I care about you and Jenny, but things haven't been good between us for a while. I know you're working hard and you're a good father, but our marriage has problems. What? I whispered, my throat tightening. Our marriage? I looked at Jim for clarity. He stared at the floor. Carol took another sip, looked at him, then went on. I'm not happy, Mark. I haven't been for a while, she said softly but firmly. I know you aren't either. We haven't been close for months. Our relationship has grown cold. I was shocked she would bring up our personal issues in front of Jim. It was a private matter. Carol, I stammered, this isn't something to talk about here. Jim doesn't need to hear this. Carol gazed at me, her eyes narrowing like she felt a bit sorry for me. It's necessary, Mark, she replied without emotion. Jim knows how I feel. I've been seeing him for the past few months and we've become close. We've grown closer than I ever imagined. Closer than you and I ever were, she said. I felt like the ground disappeared beneath me. I swallowed hard. What did you say? I saw them holding hands. Jim squeezed her hand gently as she continued, breaking my heart. Yes, Mark. I love you, but I'm not in love with you anymore. I've been unhappy for a while and Jim has tried to help. He's been a great friend to me, and now we have feelings for each other. What? No! This is not happening! I stood up, glaring at my old friend and my wife. I was angry, hurt, shocked, and confused. This couldn't be real. You must be joking. This is some sort of bad prank, right? If looks could kill, Jim would be dead. Carol calmly took another sip of wine and sighed. Her pitying look made my blood boil. It's true, Mark. I'm sorry. How long, Carol? Please sit down, Mark. Let's act like adults, Carol said, remaining calm. Boiling with rage, I asked, I said how long? I thought she might get angry at my tone, but she stayed calm. It seemed like she had practiced this speech. Her beautiful face showed no emotion. I know this is hard, Mark. I never wanted it to happen, but as you and I grew apart, Jim was there for me. And you cheated with him. Ignoring my insult, Carol replied, Yes, Mark. He's been there to console me. We couldn't hide it anymore. We had to tell you the truth. I lost control. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions. My wife and my best friend were together. You liar! You sneaky cheater! I shouted, my face burning with rage. Tell me, Carol, have you two? Carol looked shaken for a moment, but then stared coolly. Yes, Mark. Jim and I are together. I glared at Jim. You betrayed me. I thought you were my friend. You took advantage of our problems and now you're taking my wife. I moved towards them and Jim stood up. His tall, strong frame seemed even bigger. He held out his hands to stop me. Please, Mark, calm down, he said. We didn't plan this. It just happened. Don't call me by my name. You're not my friend. Come on, Mark. I do care about you. I feel terrible, but I love Carol. I want her to be happy, and she's not happy now. You aren't happy either, if you're honest. You don't know anything, I yelled, nearly out of control. Please, Mark, Carol said. I know this is hard, but we can't stay married. I will make this as easy as I can. Jim will support me and Jenny. Jenny! My Jenny! I screamed. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm her mother, Carol pleaded. She needs me, and Jim said, You won't take my daughter. Jim can go to hell, but I'll never give Jenny up. Never. She's your daughter, too, Carol said, her voice finally rising. You don't have to give her up. She's yours and always will be. Please, Mark, Jim said. Let's be reasonable. What happens between Carol and me won't change you being Jenny's dad. She needs her mom, too. You'll have all the visits you want, but I love Carol, and Jenny will be well taken care of. Friend, I spat out. Some friend you are. Never call me that again. You're a snake taking my wife and my daughter. I see now why Carol and I couldn't work things out. You were pretending to be my friend while stealing my family. I must have called him a few more names, but I don't remember. Losing my wife and the threat of losing my daughter made me lose my mind. I turned my anger toward my old friend and made a big mistake. I'll hurt you, I cried, rushing at him and swinging my fist. Jim was taller and stronger than me. He easily blocked my punch and pushed me into a table, making me fall to the floor. Embarrassed and in pain, I quickly got up. Carol screamed, "No! Stop it!" she cried as I swung again at Jim. This time he caught my fist easily, like stopping a kid. Fighting was not my thing, and it was foolish to attack him. "Stop it, Mark!" Jim shouted, pushing me into a chair. "Just listen and calm down." Carol stood next to him, looking at me with disbelief, pity, and amazement. Jim had stopped me so easily it was humiliating. "Please, Mark," she pleaded. "It doesn't have to be like this. Jim and I aren't asking anything from you. He earns enough to support me and Jenny without any problems. Jenny will always be your daughter, and of course I'll give you generous visitation rights." "Never." "Come on, Mark," Jim said with pity. "You may not think so right now, but we can still be friends. You know I care about you, but I love Carol. I know this will take some time, and I'm going to help as much as I can." He took a deep breath and said, "We can't help that we fell in love, man. Just accept it, and things will be a lot smoother. I know you don't believe me right now, but we both still care about you. A lot. I'll help you get through this, and Jenny will always know you're her father. I'll never get in the way of your relationship with her. That will never change." I was still hurting from my humiliating defeat. Carol was watching, crying softly, but her look was more pity than sympathy. Big Jim just stood there waiting for my next move. I knew he worked out a lot. He had lots of free time since he was single and didn't have to support a family. I was always busy with work and family, leaving me no free time. I was out of shape, working long hours to provide for my family. I couldn't beat him in a fair fight, but my anger took over, and I wasn't giving up yet. I acted like I was calming down and stood up. As I straightened my clothes and took a deep breath, they both watched me carefully. Carol was wearing high heels, almost at my height. Jim was much taller and looked down at me as I shot him a look of pure hate. Well, this is a surprise. The two people I trust most in the world have just betrayed me. "I'm sorry," Carol whimpered. "I couldn't let you go on thinking everything was fine. We couldn't do that to you." "Yeah, right," I whispered sadly. "Well, forget both of you." "Please, Mark," Jim said. "I feel terrible about this, you know, but we respect you too much to go behind your back. We still care about you a lot." "Yeah, I can tell," I said sarcastically. "Please understand," Carol said with sad eyes. "I didn't mean for things to end up this way. It just happened. I'm so sorry, honey." She went to hug me, but I surprised them both and pushed her back against Jim. She stumbled and fell against his chest, and he caught her before she fell. In the split second he caught her, he was vulnerable. I quickly swung my fist as hard as I could and slammed it into Jim's head. At the last moment he saw it coming, and his eyes widened, his face twisted as my knuckles hit his nose. There was a sickening crunch, and blood splattered onto the carpet. Carol screamed in panic, "No!" as she watched Jim collapse at her feet, blood spurting from his nose. He was dazed, but still conscious. I was on him in a second, swinging my fists at his face, but he recovered quickly. He took a few hits to the head and then pushed me away. "You jerk!" he shouted in a strange nasal voice. He started to come at me, but Carol pulled his arm. "No, Jim, don't!" she cried, holding him back. I wanted him to come at me, but he just stood there, wincing with his nose dripping blood. "Come on, wife-stealer," I taunted, trying to get him to fight. "You can steal her behind my back, but you're a coward in a fair fight. Need a woman to protect you? Can't fight your own battles?" His eyes were burning with anger, but Carol held onto his arm. I guess he knew he was the winner in the end, getting my wife. "Forget you, Mark," he finally said. "You're lucky she's here to protect you. Don't pull this again, or I'll beat you up." "Big talk, coward," I growled, with my hands ready to fight. Jim relaxed and let Carol pull him away. He took out a handkerchief and wiped the blood from his nose. The two of them walked to the front door in silence before Carol turned back to me angrily. "It didn't have to be like this," Carol snapped. "We tried to let you down easy, Mark, but you had to get physical." "Forget you and forget him too," I told her bitterly. "Oh, I guess you've already done that." Carol's face twisted in anger, but she didn't speak. I then noticed the two suitcases by the closet. Jim picked one up and headed for the front door, casting me angry looks as he left. Carol picked up the smaller one and followed him out the door. She stopped once, looking back at me like she wanted to say something, but instead, she just turned and left. As they drove off, I ran to my car and drove like a madman to Becky's house. I parked and rushed to the front door, knocking in a panic. Becky's mother answered with a sad look on her face. "Hello, Mark," she said sadly. "I know why you're here. Carol called a few minutes earlier and spoke to Jenny. Jenny said her mom told her to leave the house and go somewhere. I don't know what she told her. I think they're picking her up somewhere, but they didn't tell me where." "You knew about this?" I asked in disbelief. "Well, not everything. Carol asked me to keep it quiet, so I did." She then looked at me with the same pity my wife did. "I'm so sorry about all this. I always thought you two had a great marriage. I didn't know about all your problems." "Yeah, I didn't either," I told her angrily. "Do you know where Jenny went? Any friends she might be with? I need to find her." "I don't, Mark. I'm sorry. I would tell you if I did. You know that." "Bullshit," I growled. "She's cheating and you're covering for her. I know that now. I wonder if your husband knows you're covering for a cheater. Maybe you're cheating too, and you both cover for each other." "I don't have time for cheaters anymore, so don't ever talk to me again." She looked angry and stared at me. Then she slammed the door in my face. I left her house feeling hopeless. My wife and ex-friend had tricked me again. They had it all planned out. Carol had betrayed me, and now Jenny was gone too. I couldn't think clearly. My mind was full of problems. I went home to an empty house, feeling like I was dead inside. Somehow I got to work the next day. After a few hours, I started to feel a bit normal again. The busy work helped me forget my problems. After work, I went home and tried to think. The first thing I did was call Jenny. "Hello, Dad?" She answered right away. "Jenny, I miss you so much, sweetie. I want to come and get you and bring you home with me, honey." There was a long, awkward pause. "Where are you?" I'm with Mom," she said, sounding tense. "Mom said I should tell you that I'm fine and—" "Where are you? I want to come and get you." "I can't, Dad. Mom and Uncle Jim told me—" "Stop! He's not your uncle. Never mention him again, Jenny." I spoke out of anger without thinking about how it would sound to Jenny. I'm sorry, Jenny. I'm just so upset, honey." I apologized as Jenny started to cry. "Please, honey, just tell me where you are. I'll get you." "I can't, Dad," she sobbed. "Mom said I have to wait before I can see you again. She said you're very upset right now, and I'm upset with her, not you, baby." I interrupted. "They betrayed me, but you did nothing wrong. Nothing. I just need to see you, and we need to be together, please." Suddenly, the line was cut off. I called her back, but it went to voicemail. I pounded the table in frustration. No doubt Carol was filling her head with lies. I stormed out to the car and sped to Jim's house. I ran up to the door and knocked loudly, but no one answered. I checked the garage and saw his SUV and BMW were gone. I looked in the windows but saw no one. Suddenly, a police car pulled up. The officer got out, glaring at me, and called me over. "I'm looking for my daughter," I told him before he could speak. "Yeah," he said, looking at me without much sympathy. "I know. The neighbors called and said someone was snooping around the house. I also heard about your separation and the trouble with your wife." "Who told you that?" I asked cautiously. "Does it matter?" he said. "You need to leave, now. You're not welcome here. If you come back, it will be trespassing, and I'll have to arrest you." I was almost out of control. I took a deep breath and got in my car. Jim must have taken them somewhere out of my reach. They had tricked me again. Of course, I got a lawyer, and he gave me bad news. I'd have to split everything, including the house. Carol would likely get custody of Jenny, even though she'd been unfaithful. I might get custody if the judge decided I was a good parent and Jenny wanted to live with me. That was my only hope. Despite the short call with her, I knew she loved me. I was there when she was sick, took her to her after-school events, and attended parents' night at her school. I had been there for every important moment, but now I was alone. Carol had Jim. I needed someone to help me through this. I needed Jenny in my life so we could be a family again. I was served divorce papers at home. Carol knew my work schedule and told her lawyer. She added a note saying she didn't want to embarrass me by serving me at work. I didn't care about that. The papers said we would split everything 50-50ths. We could sell the house and split the money, or she could buy me out and live there with Jenny. According to her lawyer, she preferred to stay in the house so Jenny could continue school in the same area. We'd keep our cars and there was no alimony, but I'd have to pay for Jenny's care. My lawyer said it was a fair split. I didn't agree. After all, she cheated on me. Jenny was my daughter, and I wanted full custody. He said it was foolish, but he'd submit my counteroffer. Meanwhile, Jim took my family on vacation in Florida. I never found out where exactly. Jenny did call me. Our conversations were strained, and she seemed nervous. I tried to tell her I loved her and needed her, but I sounded desperate. No surprise, because I was desperate to keep some self-respect. With my family gone, I threw myself into work. There was always something to do as an accountant, and I was working overtime as much as possible. I didn't know when Carol and Jenny returned from Florida. I guess they didn't want me to know. On the day of our court date, I arrived with my lawyer. Carol and Jim arrived with theirs. I glared at him, hoping my look could hurt him. He just looked away and didn't meet my eyes. Carol looked indifferent, as if our broken family and failed marriage were already in the past. When it was time for the final decision, the judge took Jenny into his private office and spoke to her for nearly an hour. I kept asking my lawyer why it was taking so long. She must miss me by now. I haven't seen her in weeks. She just had to tell the judge that she wanted to stay with me, and then I could move on with my life. The judge finally came out and gave his final decision. He said it was a tough choice, and that neither Carol nor I should ignore how hard it was for a 14-year-old to decide. Jenny would live with Carol and her new husband. I almost fainted and barely heard anything after that. I walked out of the courtroom before the judge finished, ignoring his call to sit back down. I just stumbled into the hallway. Once I regained my senses, my lawyer came out and explained the rest of the judge's decision. I had to pay for custody and either buy Carol's half of the house or sell it and split the money. My lawyer seemed happy with the outcome and proud that I didn't have to pay alimony and got good visitation rights. "You did okay, Mark," he said, patting my back. "It could have been much worse." I was too stunned to speak. Carol came out of the courtroom next, giving me a sorrowful look. Her new husband just walked away without saying a word, taking her by the arm and leading her out of the courthouse. I didn't see Jenny. I was in a fog as I left the building. In the parking lot, Carol came over to me while her new husband stood a few yards away. "This can work out, Mark," Carol said gently. "I know this isn't what you wanted, but Jenny loves you and wants to be with you. She will live with us, but you can see her anytime you want. We both want you to stay in her life and will do everything to make this transition easy for you." I just stared at her, shocked. Was she out of her mind? When I didn't respond, Carol spoke softly again. "Please, Mark, I know this is hard. We need to make Jenny's life as smooth as we can. It's for her good." Finally, my mind cleared. I looked at her husband, who stared back blankly and then straight into Carol's eyes. "No way!" I spat with anger. "Get out of my life!" Carol's sad expression disappeared. Her husband heard me and glared. My lawyer tugged at my arm, trying to pull me away. "Come on, Mark. This won't help. Let's go." Carol said angrily, "Stop being childish. You need to help Jenny. This isn't easy for her either. She needs you now more than ever." "She's your daughter now," I said bitterly. "Don't ever contact me again, you or Jenny, and keep him away from me too." "Stop!" my lawyer shouted before I could say more. He pulled me forcefully and told me, "Just stop talking, Mark. This won't help. Wait until you calm down." Carol had tears in her eyes. "She's your daughter, Mark. She needs you." "Forget it," I told her. I looked at her husband, who was still glaring. "You too." My lawyer dragged me away as I kept yelling, "Take care of her, you two. Just leave me alone." Everyone around us watched and listened. An officer came out to see what was happening. I stopped yelling then. They took me to my car as my lawyer tried to explain the details of the judgment. I had to pay some amount each month for Jenny and come up with money for the house. At a point, I yanked my arm away and ran to my car, sobbing. The next day, the hold on our finances was lifted. Carol took half of our savings and investments, all the money I saved for our family. Some was left for me, but it wasn't enough to do much more than survive. I got an official letter telling me to either move or give her part of the house's money if I wanted to sell it. I quickly replied that I would sell it. With a policeman, Carol returned the next day to get her car and all her personal things. She also took most of the furniture I had paid for. When she finished, she tried to speak to me. I told her to get lost and walked away. The cop warned me to be civil, but I didn't care. When they walked out of the house, Carol had tears in her eyes. She stopped in the front yard and asked the cop to wait. She turned to me and said she wanted to talk. I went out to the front yard, the cop staying nearby. We stood there in silence for a moment. I waited with an indifferent look as my former wife tried to gather her thoughts. "Please don't hate me, Mark," she said, wiping her tears. "I know you're not happy right now. It's not easy, but it will all work out in the end." I wanted to curse her, but stayed quiet. "We weren't happy together, and you know it," she continued. "Things were getting worse, and I couldn't go on." She stopped crying and wiped her eyes. She took a breath and looked more determined. "But Mark, what I really need to talk about is Jenny. She's not happy now. Our divorce was hard on her." I snorted as if it wasn't my fault. Carol noticed but ignored it. "Please just listen," she pleaded. "Her teacher said her schoolwork is suffering. She barely talks to me and doesn't see her friends anymore. She stays in her room all the time. I'm worried. Jim and I know she needs you. I need your help with Jenny so she can have a good life, a life with both parents. Jim said he won't." "Don't mention him to me ever again," I shouted. "Just go away with that lying thief, Carol, but never say his name to me. I never want to see or hear about him ever. He's a backstabber and you know it. He knew we were married, and he still chased after you. He acted like he was nice, then he tempted you with his money and cheated on me with you." "That's not what happened, Mark, not at all." "That's exactly what happened," I yelled. "I thought he was my friend. A friend wouldn't do that. He's a cheat and a liar, and so are you." I said that too loud, and the cop moved closer, silently warning me to keep it calm. I noticed one of our neighbors had come out to watch. Carol flinched at my words but signaled to the cop that it was okay. "Please, Mark," Carol said, trying to stay calm. "I really need your help with Jenny. She's upset. I've never seen her so hurt." "Ask that jerk to help. He's with you now. She's his problem. He's not her father, you are. She needs you more than ever. You must think I'm stupid, but I guess I was pretty dumb. I was the clueless husband that you found it easy to cheat on. The fool who thought my friend actually respected me and my marriage would last forever. I was an ignorant fool, Carol, so I see where you're coming from. If I was so dumb while we were married, why not now?" I laughed, then my face turned serious. "But now that I know about you two, I'm not so clueless. Now I see how sneaky and underhanded you and that jerk really are. How easily you lie. You both must have had a great laugh about me, didn't you? You were cheating and I was such a trusting fool. That's in the past now, Carol. Now I hate you and wish you'd just disappear. First, you cheat with a friend, then you break up our family, and now you need my help. What a joke. Never again." Carol stiffened, hurt by my accusations. "Please, Mark, we never thought that about you. I never wanted to hurt you, and neither did, he. But that's all in the past. We're split up now, but we still have a daughter, and we have to get along for her sake. Think of Jenny." I looked at her with disgust. "Yeah, right," I sneered. "Damn, you really are something, you cheater. You cheat on me, and now you see the consequences. Not as much fun as you expected, huh?" Carol flinched and let out a small sob. The cop glared at me. "Let me ask you something, my unfaithful wife," I said in a calmer tone. "How can you have a relationship with a man with no morals?" That caught her off guard, and she stopped crying. "What? Jim has morals? A guy that cheats with his friend's wife?" I chuckled. "First he tempts her, then carries on a secret affair behind his friend's back. Finally, he takes her away with his money, takes his daughter, and ruins his friend's marriage. You call a guy like that moral? He's the opposite. It was never—" I interrupted. "How can you ever trust a guy like that, Carol?" I do trust him," she stammered, off balance. "Really? I asked sarcastically. A guy that takes his best friend's wife and daughter? A guy that uses his money to buy her love? Carol glanced at the cop and said hesitantly, "He's not like that, Mark, and you know it, and yes, I do trust him." But her eyes were darting around and I could see I struck a nerve. "I don't see how," I continued confidently. "You know the kind of guy he is. He has money and sleeps with lots of women. You're just another one to him. I can't tell you how many times he's bragged to his friends at the bar about his latest fling. You're just the latest. By the way, have you been tested yet?" "Tested?" She looked confused. "For diseases. He gets around and might have caught something and passed it on to you. For my safety, I had to get tested right after you left me for him. You know he's quite the ladies' man." "He's not like that anymore, Mark," she shot back. "Sure he is. You saw him in action. Girls flock to that guy. He has lots of girlfriends. I wouldn't be surprised if he's seeing someone else on the side. Do you know where he is right now?" He's at work." "Sure he is. Is that what he told you?" "Yes. He's at work and maybe he took the afternoon off to meet someone. He works with a lot of attractive girls, you know, like that one at his party. Maybe he's with her now. Then he comes home and tells you sweet things. You trust him too much, Carol. I know he still goes out alone and could meet many pretty girls, some younger and prettier than you. You're not getting any younger, you know. He may already be bored of you. He likes variety. It takes a lot of women to keep him happy." Carol's eyes narrowed as I laughed. "Shit! Maybe he's with someone right now. I wouldn't be surprised. You know he's done it before, right? You did get tested, didn't you?" Carol was getting angry and frustrated with my suggestions. I guess she never thought about Jim's other women before now. "No, I didn't. But he told me we're exclusive. He loves me, you know." "Oh, right." I laughed at how naive she seemed. "He tells that to a lot of women. Jim's a player, Carol. You know his past. I guess he wouldn't tell you that he was with other women. Not yet, anyway." Her eyes showed some insecurity. My words were hitting home. Poor Carol wasn't as confident about her relationship as she was a few moments before. "You say Jenny is having trouble dealing with our divorce? How will she feel when she finds out you broke up our family for a guy that's cheating on you? That you abandoned our marriage, broke her father's heart, and messed up her life for a sleazy, lying jerk? That'll really help her handle things. Get real, you fool. That guy isn't the honest person you think he is. Unless you think it's okay for a man to sleep with and steal his best friend's wife. Remember that the next time he goes on a so-called business trip. He doesn't mind being with married women or any woman for that matter. If he has a naive girlfriend at home waiting for him, all the better." Carol blinked and suddenly looked pale. Her eyes were nervous and darting around. She looked like she wasn't sure what to say. I kept going. "I've known him for quite a while now," I said, smiling wickedly. "You think he's a great guy, right? I know for a fact he cheated on his first wife. He cheated on her many times. Why wouldn't he do that again? After all, he's not even married to you. You're just someone to keep him company, just a fling. I bet he'll hold off cheating for a while, long enough to make you forget. Then it's back to normal for him." Her eyes were flashing angrily now. She knew what I was doing, and she didn't like it. "He's not like that anymore," she stated through tight lips. "Sure, he dated a lot before we were together. He told me." "He told you exactly what you wanted to hear, right?" I laughed. "Feed you some lies to keep you happy, then do whatever he wants. How will Jenny ever respect you after she finds out?" I let that sink in, then snickered. "We used to laugh about it. We'd go out drinking, and when he had a few drinks, he'd laugh and say what a fool his ex-wife was. Remember her, Carol? The woman he married? He didn't respect her at all. He cheated on her from the start of their marriage. He thought it was a joke and played around for years. Now he's got you, another easy target. The pattern continues." "That's a lie," she spat. "Jim's not like that. He loves me. Just like he loved Martha. Face it, Carol, you got yourself a real winner. A cheating, lying boyfriend who already ruined one marriage. What makes you think he won't do it again?" Carol's fists were balled up. Her eyes were full of anger. "That's a lie, Mark. Jim's a good guy. I know it." "Is that right? What'll you think the next time he comes home late? Or when you find lipstick on his collar? Or a number on a piece of paper in his pocket? Or when another woman calls him? Or when he dances with some pretty girl at a club? Can you still trust him? He has a history of cheating. I doubt he'll be faithful to you. After all, you're just someone easy for him. If he couldn't be faithful to his wife, why should he be faithful to you? Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the cop smirking. He knew exactly what I was doing, making Carol doubt her faith in Jim. She was caught between anger and confusion. She didn't believe me, but she couldn't dismiss what I was saying either. "Just give Jenny a call, will you?" she finally spat out. "She needs you now, Mark. You have visitation this weekend. You can pick up Jenny from school Friday afternoon." "Forget it." "What?" "I said forget it. Jenny's your problem now. I'm not going to let you and that jerk mess around with visitation, canceling last minute, asking to change dates for your convenience. Just forget it. I don't trust you." "And by the way," I said as I pulled a check from my pocket, "it was made out to Carol with a note in the description line." "What's this?" "You have to pick her up, Mark. She wants to see you." "Forget the visitation," I told her, cold as ice. "Here's a check for the full amount of my child support forever. It also covers part of her college fund. Now that you and that jerk are her parents, you deal with the consequences. I want no further contact with any of you." Carol took the check and looked at it like it was something awful. "You don't mean that." "I do. But Mark, listen." "Goodbye, Carol. You and your cheater deserve each other. Don't contact me again. Tell Jenny I'm sorry she left me too. I really thought she loved me enough. I loved her more than anything, but seeing her often would just break my heart all over again. I'm moving on from both of you." I noticed the cop listening, so I didn't finish my threat. I didn't want any trouble. Carol knew how I felt. I walked into the house and slammed the door. I could hear my ex-wife sputtering in frustration. Nothing about our talk had gone as she expected. My cell phone had a dozen messages by the end of the day. I just deleted them and didn't bother listening. I went to my provider and got a new phone. I guess it was Jenny or Carol who called, but I was in too much pain to listen to anything they had to say. The next couple of days, I finished my preparations for my new life. I went to the bank and pulled my money out of my accounts and opened a new one. There wasn't much left after the check I wrote to Carol. I then went to a real estate agent and put my home on the market. When the sign was up and the agent left, I got out my spreader and scattered weed killer over my entire yard. It would soon kill all the grass and plants, leaving the yard bare as a desert. I bought fish from the market and dropped them down the heating vents. I turned on the heat to let the smell of rotting fish fill the house. I was purposely ruining the house so it would sell cheap, and she couldn't get a dime from it. The next day, I moved out the little furniture I had left and rented a tiny, cheap studio apartment. It was close to Jim's car dealership and my office. I sold my car for cash and pawned everything that reminded me of my failed marriage. Then I focused on work, doing as much overtime as I could. My boss was happy, and I think I was too. Working hard helped me forget about the people who betrayed me. The real estate agent called to tell me my house wouldn't sell. "It has a terrible smell and the yard is a mess," he said. "Just lower the price as much as needed," I replied. "Are you sure? We could improve the yard and fix the smell. We might get full price then," he suggested, clearly wanting a better commission. "No, just sell it quickly. We might have to cut the price by 30% or even more if we can't fix the smell." "No problem. Cut the price in half if you have to." "Okay, if you're sure." "I'm sure." The house eventually sold, but the price was so low that we barely got anything from it. I sent Carol the sales documents and a check for $500. She must have been shocked and expected a lot more. She didn't have my new number, so she couldn't contact me directly. I told her to go through my lawyer. The lawyer called me and said Carol was upset about the price. I just laughed. He also mentioned that Jenny was calling him almost every week. "Don't you want to let her know how you are?" he asked. "I know you're upset with your wife, but your daughter was nearly crying when I told her I couldn't give her your new number." "They made their choice. Now they have to live with it," I responded. A few days after the house sold, I started the next part of my plan. I wasn't sure how much Carol's family or Jim's family knew about our problems, so I wrote an email explaining in detail how my former best friend seduced my wife behind my back, how he broke up my family and took my daughter away. I didn't lie, but I made them look like the worst people ever. I gathered email addresses of everyone we knew: Carol's family, her friends, Jim's family and friends, our church, and the club Jim went to sometimes. I even got the addresses of Jim's employees and customers and sent the email to all of them. I also posted some unkind comments on Jim's Facebook page, his company website, and any other places I could think of. I hit the send button and let everything unfold. The next day, my lawyer called me, upset about the emails. He asked me to stop sending them, saying I could be sued. I told him I couldn't be sued for telling the truth and sent him a copy of the email. He said it was truthful, but warned that a judge might not see it the same way. I tried to protect Jenny from all this and didn't send anything to her school or her friends' parents, but I knew they would find out, and Jenny was probably embarrassed when confronted at school. I had leaflets made up about how Jim and my ex-wife wronged me. I didn't use my name, but they'd know who wrote it. I went to Jim's dealership in the middle of the night and put them up everywhere, on trees, telephone poles, and light fixtures. I also put them in restaurant bathrooms and even paid some women to place them in the ladies' rooms. Soon, almost everyone in town knew about their affair. I made sure everyone knew Jim was a car salesman and not to trust him. By then, my lawyer was getting calls from all over. He was upset with me, so I just dropped him as my lawyer. He was pleased I did. Some signs were taken down, but I didn't care. I had more and put them up again, even around Jim's house, which I knew must have made him angry. After the divorce, I was nearly broke, but working overtime helped me make a lot of money. My cheap apartment cost very little and I had few bills, so my savings grew quickly. In a few months, I had saved a lot of money. I hired a private investigator to check on Jim and my wife's schedules so I'd know where they were at any time. With this information, I was ready for the next part of my plan. Jim Simpson was well off, but not super rich. By now, everyone knew about his cheating ways, which hurt his business. People were hesitant to buy cars from him, so his income took a hit. Jim was a car salesman, but he had a bad reputation, even worse than others in his field. As his earnings dropped, he struggled to keep up his fancy lifestyle. Carol worked at an art gallery, but things there were also going downhill. A lot of people stopped coming by because they didn't want to deal with a woman known for cheating, especially the wives. They didn't want their husbands around a woman like Carol. She used to go to the gym to maintain her attractive looks, but as money got tight, she had to stop going. Jim sold his BMW but kept their fancy SUV. I wondered how long he could keep paying the mortgage on their big house. I hoped that would soon fall apart too. I went out sometimes and met women, but not for romance, just to forget about work. Carol had ruined that for me. None of my dates led anywhere, and I didn't care. I'd get some of the women drunk and pay them to make prank calls to Jim's house when he was out. It wasn't hard to get them to play along. I listened in when the women called. Carol would pick up and they'd ask for Jim. Carol would say he wasn't home, and the caller would leave a message that hinted at something fishy like, "Tell him Kathy said hi," or "Let him know Mary will be ready tomorrow." Carol would hang up, but I knew it made her suspicious of Jim. After all, they both had a history of cheating. I even got some guys to call Jim's workplace and complain about him. They made up stories about Jim being a cheater or acting shady. Some even said Jim was hitting on their wives. It was all lies, but it seemed to work because Jim eventually had to switch jobs. I did the same with Carol, making sure seeds of doubt were planted in their minds. I spent most of my time working. Since I wasn't dating, I had free time and started learning about short-term stock trading online. It's not for everyone, but I saw potential in it. Setting up an online account with a brokerage firm was easy, and their training materials were helpful. With some initial learning, I saw how I could make money, even with a small starting amount. At first, I lost some money, but I learned fast. Soon, I was making more money trading than from my accounting job. In 2 months, I had enough to start options trading, which lets you make bigger profits with small investments. I spent a lot of my free time setting up trades, and within a few months, my account balance grew significantly. One evening, I stopped at a bar for a drink. I was surprised when Jim and Carol suddenly came in and confronted me. "What do you think you're doing?" Jim yelled angrily. Everyone in the bar turned to look. Jim pointed at me, shouting, "I know it's you messing with me!" Carol stood beside him, glaring at me. "It's you, isn't it? You're ruining Jim's job and mine." "I don't know what you're talking about," I said calmly. Jim's face turned red. "I should beat you up. You're such a jerk." Carol added, "You're messing with our lives. You're a real piece of work, Mark." I smirked and said, "You both are imagining things." Jim shouted, "You're ruining my job, you idiot." "And you're fooling around with my ex-wife," I said, smiling. "I'm not your wife, you moron," Carol screamed. "I left you for Jim, who's a better man than you'll ever be." Jim jumped in, threatening, "You better stop or I'll sue you." I stayed cool while they ranted. They must have had someone follow me. I hadn't planned this, but it was turning out well for me. "Sue me for what?" I asked calmly. "I did nothing wrong. You're both crazy." "For spreading lies and those emails?" Carol screamed. "I know you're bitter, but you're a loser." "Emails?" I asked. "What emails? The ones spreading rumors about us?" "Oh, those," I chuckled. "Can't handle the truth? You're a cheating wife and he's a jerk. The emails told the truth, but the leaflets weren't my idea." "You're lying!" Carol cried. "No, you are," I said, smirking. "And Jim's a loser who can't get his own woman. He had to steal his friend's wife." Jim started to lunge at me, but Carol pulled him back. He was really angry, more than I've ever seen him before. I know he would have hit me if she wasn't here. "You jerk," Carol said to me. "Do you know I lost my job? They fired me. And Jim's having trouble too. He had to change jobs, and that's not going well either. You need to stop this, Mark." I laughed. "I guess people don't like being around a liar, huh?" Jim's face twisted with anger. He looked like he was about to explode. "Stop this now or I'll—" he started to say. "You'll what?" I taunted him. "You'll steal my wife and family? Oh, wait, you already did that. Just shut up, loser." Everyone around us watched in silence. No one thought a smaller guy like me would stand up to such a big guy. People were smirking, and the manager was coming our way. I had to act fast. "Mark, I mean it," Carol said angrily. "Stop or else." I looked her in the eye and asked, "Has he started cheating on you yet, Carol? He has done it before, you know. Just ask Martha how." That was all I got to say before Jim hit me hard in the jaw. The punch drove me back into the bar and almost knocked me out. Before I could react, Jim was on me, punching wildly with both hands. "I'll kill you!" he screamed as I tried to block his punches. He landed a couple of good ones, 2 to my face and 1 to my ribs. I heard something snap before the guys around us could pull him off. By the time they dragged him away, I was in serious pain. My nose was bleeding and my ribs hurt badly. But I smiled because everything was going as planned. It took 3 guys to hold Jim down, and Carol was crying and screaming at the same time. Someone called the police and they arrived quickly. I just lay there bleeding and looking like I was in a lot of pain. I was hurting, but I was laughing inside at how well this was going. Of course, Jim got arrested for hitting me. They took him away in handcuffs with Carol sobbing as she followed him out. An ambulance was called for me. I knew I would be okay, but I let the medical people take me out on a stretcher to make it look as bad as possible. They took pictures of me, which would help with my lawsuit. As you might guess, I hired the toughest lawyer I could find and pressed charges against Jim. Carol left me dozens of crying, angry messages filled with cursing. I couldn't have been happier. It took a day for Jim to get out on bail, but his job was in big trouble. He was new there and probably still on probation. Having a big bar fight on his record did his reputation no favors. After all the bad press, he was fired and had to look for a new job. He never found steady work. About a month later, Jim was tried and convicted of assault and even attempted murder. I made sure to add that charge. He served 3 months in jail, only on weekends so he could work. But he had to pay a large fine and was on probation for years. Carol was crushed. Her new boyfriend now had a record, and finding work would be even harder. My injuries healed quickly. Jim had to pay for my medical bills. I also got a restraining order against him, another win for me. I heard later that he was selling his house because it was hard to keep up the payments without a full-time job. Jim did odd jobs for cash while looking for steady work. Carol got another job, but it didn't pay much. The 3 of them moved into a cheap 2-bedroom apartment to save money. He also sold his SUV and bought a couple of cheap cars to get around. Life was tough for them. I let things settle for a while. I made sure women called the house when Jim was at work and Carol was home. Sometimes a guy would call and ask for her when Jim was home. I tried to have them call when Jenny was at school or out, so she wasn't involved. I hoped it was bothering the cheaters. My private investigator kept tabs on the couple's work problems for me. When Jim applied for other jobs, I made sure his potential employers knew what kind of person they were considering. It took him months to finally get a job as a mechanic at a low-class car repair shop. They hired other ex-cons, so Jim's record didn't bother them. Carol worked as a waitress at a local diner but didn't make much. By this time, I had saved a lot of money. I also had a good income from all the overtime I worked. I was banking at least $10,000 a month, so it was time for the next part of my plan. When I heard that Jim had to sell his house, I went to his old neighborhood and drove by his previous home, the big one he had before all the trouble. I was happy to see a for sale sign on it. Through my lawyer, I put in a low offer for the house and was shocked when they accepted. The housing market wasn't doing well and they needed to sell. In a couple of weeks, we had a quick closing and I moved in. The house was beautiful. 4 bedrooms, 3 full bathrooms, a formal dining room, and a landscaped yard. I moved into the master bedroom, fully appreciating that this was where my ex-friend had seduced my cheating wife. It gave me a twisted sense of joy to know he'd never enjoy this bedroom or the rest of the lovely house again. I cashed in some stocks and started decorating the house. I hired a professional interior decorator to ensure it was perfect. She and I had a meeting where I explained what I wanted. She asked about the budget, and I told her I would be very generous but not wasteful. I wanted the place to feel like a home, not just a showpiece for a magazine. I had her use some pictures of my old house to help with the decor. With over $200,000 worth of furniture and decorations, she did an amazing job. I also hired a gardener to fix up the yard. It used to look amazing, but it had become a bit wild since the cheaters moved out. He added a hot tub on the deck and built a brick barbecue on the patio. It looked great. After all the updates, I think I nearly doubled the value of the home. But I wasn't planning to sell it just yet. I had other plans. It had been months since I last talked to Jenny, and I missed her a lot. I was still hurt that she chose them over me, but eventually, my need to see her was stronger than my pride. I called her cell phone one afternoon when I knew she'd be home. She couldn't reach me because my lawyer hadn't given out my number. I hoped she still had the same number and that she'd answer. Hello? Hi, Jenny. It's me, your dad. Dad? Really? Yes, honey. I miss you so much. I'm so sorry I haven't seen you. I was just too sad about what happened. I'd love to see you again if you want to. I can't believe it. It's really you? Yes, it's me, and I miss you like crazy. I miss you too. I thought you didn't want me anymore. That's not true. I was a jerk for not seeing you. I was just too upset about the divorce. But I'm better now. I would love to have you over to my place if you're free. Maybe this weekend? Sure. I need to check with Mom. She's pretty mad at you right now. I know she is, but don't worry about her. I just want to see you and catch up. Maybe we can go to a concert or do something fun. Anything you like. Okay, let me call you back. Is this your number? Yes, you can call me anytime. It's wonderful just hearing your voice. I love you, Jenny. I heard her voice break a little as she said, Me too, Dad. I love you. She hung up, and I felt on top of the world. An hour later, I got another call. You jerk, she yelled when I answered. Nice to hear from you too, Carol. You go months without any contact with your daughter, she snapped angrily. The poor girl nearly stopped crying every night for you, and now you decide to come back and break her heart again. I won't break her heart, Carol. Not like you broke mine. But you're right. I want to see her. I need to see her. There was a long silence. Carol, are you still there? Yes. I want to see Jenny. How about this weekend? Is she free? Another long pause, then, I guess so. Great. What time can I pick her up? You're really a jerk, you know, Carol said. I hope you're serious. Jenny needs you, Mark. You won't build up her hopes, get angry, and disappear again, right? No way. I've learned my lesson. I miss her, and I need her in my life. I can pick her up any time you say, Carol. Please don't make me beg. All right. How about 6 o'clock on Friday? You're not going to disappoint her again? No, 6 on Friday. I'll be there. Thanks, Carol. Okay, bye. Goodbye. I spent the week getting the house ready. Jenny was shocked when I pulled up in a black limo to pick her up. We hugged for nearly 5 minutes. Carol was watching us from the doorway with tears in her eyes. I didn't see the other guy, but I could tell Carol was surprised to see the limo. After the driver opened the door and put Jenny's suitcase in the trunk, Carol came out and squeezed my arm. You better not disappoint her, Mark. She's been looking forward to this all week long. If you upset her, I'll be very angry. I wanted to say she already hurt me when she left me, but I didn't. Don't worry, Carol, I told her softly. Now that everything between us is sorted out, I just want to help Jenny any way I can. She gave me a long, hard look, and then walked back into her small apartment. Jenny was squealing with excitement as we drove away. We had a wonderful weekend. Jenny was amazed to find that her old house, where she and Carol lived with Jim, was now my house. I took her to a fancy restaurant and let her order anything she wanted. On Saturday, we went to a boy band concert. I had never heard of them, but a woman from work told me about them, and I got tickets. Jenny was thrilled. She also loved the hot tub on the back deck. It made me think about getting a swimming pool installed. I had a barbecue party with a few of my friends from work. They had kids around Jenny's age, and they all got along great. I spent a lot of money on this weekend, but it was worth it. By the time I took her home, Jenny was talking excitedly about the weekend and making plans for the next time she came over. The weekend was a huge success. I hadn't been this happy since before my divorce. Monday evening, I got another call from Carol. "You bought Jim's house?" she cried, clearly upset. "He took a big loss on that house. He never wanted to sell, and he's really angry to find out it was you who bought it cheap." "So he thinks I cheated him?" I replied, stressing the word cheated. Carol didn't miss the point. "So, payback's rough, right?" she said bitterly before I could. "He wasn't forced to sell," I told her. "I heard it was a distress sale, so in a way, I did him a favor by buying it." "You're one cold-hearted jerk, Mark. I never thought you were like that." "I didn't used to be," I replied. "I used to be a nice, average guy, pretty trusting and naive. Look where that got me. A couple of cheaters hurt me, and I learned my lesson." "Thanks for that." After a long pause, she hung up. In the next few months, Jenny spent nearly every weekend with me. I couldn't have been happier. The house I bought from Jim was now mine, and with Jenny around, it truly felt like home. It was bigger and fancier than our old one. Unlike the old house, this one didn't carry any bad memories for me. I forgot about its past and enjoyed its comforts. Jenny loved it too. She often told her mom how much fun she was having with me. Jim spent his weekends in jail, but during the week, he had to listen to my daughter rave about my new house and how I had fixed it up. Carol noticed Jim hated hearing it and had to ask Jenny to stop talking about it because it made him so upset. Too bad for him. A few months later, I went to pick up Jenny. Jim was still in jail, leaving Carol alone. Last week, Jenny asked if her mom could join us sometime. I thought it might be nice. When I pulled up, Jenny ran down the stairs with her bag. I told her to invite her mom to have dinner with us. She was thrilled and ran back inside. A few minutes later, Carol appeared at the door with a scowl. She told Jenny to pack her suitcase, then walked towards me. She looked suspicious and asked, "What are you trying to do, Mark?" "There's no plan, Carol," I said honestly. "Jenny asked to have you with us sometime. I thought it could be nice. Despite our bad past, I know you're a good mom. You might not believe this, but I miss you." Carol flinched. My words surprised her, and she turned away for a moment. "I know you're with Jim now. I understand. But time moves on, Carol. We used to be a family, and Jenny and I would like to have you with us. If you're just going to be alone all weekend, why not spend it with us? I promise I won't cause any trouble." She tried to hide a smile at my comment, but couldn't. "I don't think Jim would like me going with you." "You're not going with me," I reminded her. "Jenny will be with us, just a nice family meal and a pleasant chat. No pressure, Carol. I think you'll enjoy it." She gave me a hard stare before letting out a deep breath. "Fine. I guess it won't hurt to have a meal. Give me a minute." The evening turned out wonderful. Despite her betrayal, I still loved Carol. I can't just turn off my feelings. She was a bad wife, and I knew things could never go back. At the same time, I was a lousy father for leaving my daughter for so long. I admit I still think kindly of Carol sometimes. I could never trust her as a wife again, but that didn't mean I didn't enjoy her company that night. I could tell the past few months have been hard on her. She had gained weight, her expression was rather harsh, and the fine lines around her eyes and mouth seemed deeper. But in my eyes, she was still beautiful. Jenny was the most excited, chattering on about how nicely the house was fixed up. While I prepared dinner, she showed her mom all the upgrades in the backyard, the updated deck, the hot tub, the gazebo, and the flower gardens. She even mentioned my plans to install a swimming pool. Then she took Carol on a tour around the house. I wasn't there to see it, but when Carol returned to the kitchen, her eyes were misty with tears. Maybe she was missing what she used to have before I began ruining her boyfriend's career. "You've really done a lot with this house," Carol said over dinner. How can you afford all this on an accountant's salary? I don't have anyone to spend my money on." When she gave me a sympathetic look, I quickly added, "And I made some investments that turned out well. I'm glad you like it. I wanted it to feel like a home." I glanced at Jenny, who was enjoying a piece of prime rib. "Now it does." After dinner, we had apple pie and ice cream with our coffee. Then I took them outside and put on a small fireworks show with some cheap fireworks I had bought. It wasn't great, but Jenny squealed with delight as they lit up the sky. For a few precious moments, it felt like we were a family again. But all good things come to an end. I invited Carol to spend the night. I let her know she would have her own room and there was nothing romantic in my offer. She politely declined, so I called a cab and sent her home. Work kept me very busy for the rest of the month. I was still making money from my investments, but I kept working to keep my mind off my lack of a love life. I could have hired companions, but I really didn't want empty relationships. Daydreaming was cheaper and nearly as satisfying. Mostly I wanted a strong bond with my daughter, and if I could get along with Carol, all the better. One weeknight, I was shocked by a call from Jenny. "Dad!" she cried, sniffling. "Jenny, what's wrong?" "It's Mom. She's crying. She's in the bedroom and won't let me in." "What happened?" "They had a fight. I think Mom found out Jim's been cheating. She's a mess, Dad. Can you come over?" So my prediction came true. The jerk's true nature finally showed. "Where is he now?" "They had a big fight in the bedroom," Jenny said, her voice cracking. "I was so scared. Mom was screaming at him. There was lots of banging. Afterward, he came out and slammed the door hard. He was yelling as he left the house. I think he drove away. I'm so scared, Dad. Just stay there, Jenny. I'll be right over." I called the police and reported a possible domestic abuse case. They met me at Carol's apartment, and we knocked on the door. My ex-wife answered after a long time, looking really tired. Jenny ran out and into my arms. I hugged her tight as she cried into my chest. "Thank you for coming, Dad," she said with tears. "I'm so scared." Carol went to the kitchen and sat down as the police officer asked her questions. I looked for any signs of abuse. She didn't admit to any, and I didn't see any visible bruises, but that didn't mean she wasn't hurt. I asked the officer if I could talk to her alone, and he agreed. "Carol," I said softly, "are you in any danger? Would you like to come over to my house for a while, just until things calm down?" "Oh, Mark, I don't know what to say," she sobbed. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden. You can stay in the extra bedroom. Jenny will be there too. We can take care of you. I care about you, Carol, and Jenny loves you. I don't want to leave you here with him. Just forget our past problems. I want you to be safe. Please come with us. Jenny and I are asking you." "Okay," she whispered so softly I could barely hear her. I leaned over and hugged her. "Thank you, Carol," I said with feeling. "Don't worry about anything. Let's pack some things for you. If you forget something, we can buy it." She cried a little, then whispered, "Thank you, Mark." The police had to write a report, but since Carol said there was no abuse, Jim didn't have to answer any more questions. Lucky for him, still on probation for hitting me, or he'd be back in jail. Over the next few weeks, Carol pretty much moved back in with me. She was heartbroken by her boyfriend's betrayal and ended things with him. We talked about it once. She said he was cheating with the receptionist at the car repair shop where he worked. Sounded typical of him. Over those weeks, I did everything I could to make a safe and loving home for Jenny and Carol. Jenny was the happiest she had been in a long time. Her attitude got better, her school grades improved, and even her social life picked up as boys began showing up around the house. We ate dinner together and went to the movies sometimes. I loved it when Carol cooked for us. Knowing a delicious dinner was waiting made me eager to leave work on time. There wasn't any romantic feeling between Carol and me. She was still upset about her situation, and I understood how she felt. From the start, I made it clear that we were just friends, but that I wanted her to be safe. Having her there with Jenny and me felt like a real home again. I found her a job with a client of mine. I bought her a car so she could go to work and be more independent. She hugged me hard when I handed her the keys, and we both began to cry. Jenny joined in, and we all had a family hug. It was a little rough when she started dating again. I knew Carol would meet someone new soon, but it felt awkward when she told me she had a date one weekend. I told her I was happy for her, but it was a bit of a sad moment for me. I knew we could never be together again, not without trust, and I could never trust her again. Still, I was glad she was moving on with her life. We found her an apartment nearby. Most of the money she got from our divorce was spent on bills and Jim's legal costs. She did have some furniture from Jim's apartment, but it wasn't enough. So I gave her some extra money for what she needed and a coffee maker as a housewarming gift. Jenny was sad she was leaving, and Carol said she'd miss us a lot, but it was time for her to be on her own. I agreed. Living with me would only bring up bad memories for both of us. She needed a fresh start. The guy she's dating seems nice. Jenny said he speaks kindly, and she likes him. That's as good a reference as I could hope for. As Carol moved away, Jenny and I grew closer. I think I depend on her as much as she depends on me. I watched her grow from a little girl into a smart, responsible young lady. She's taking advanced courses at school as we start looking at colleges. Her grades are good, and many universities are interested in her. She's a wonderful daughter, and I couldn't ask for better. I'm so proud of her. My love life isn't very exciting, but some women have shown interest in an old accountant like me. I have them over sometimes so Jenny can give me her opinion. So far, none have turned into a solid relationship, but I still hope there's someone out there for me. Only time will tell. In the meantime, I stay busy and successful in my work, and I enjoy raising Jenny for the short time before she leaves for college. I have to say, things turned out better than I thought they would a few years ago. Divorce is tough, but life goes on. Hey audience, if you liked this video and want to keep up with more thrilling stories, make sure to subscribe to Prince Cheating Tales and hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss out on our upcoming adventures. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next wonderful story.